Chapter 7:13. Hen Bieli glanced at Yun Yang after he finished speaking. Yun Yang smiled bitterly and said, "Head landlord Hen, it's not easy to help you. You're putting me on the fire to roast." Hen Bieli answered honestly, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to hand this hot potato to young Master Yun either. However, at this moment and place, the only one who can truly maintain fairness and who I can trust is young Master Yun. There's no one else." Yun Yang asked, "Why does head landlord Hen think that I'm completely uninterested in this dragonhide treasure map? Is it just because of my boastful words just now? Don't tell me I won't seize the opportunity to take it for myself?" Hen Bieli chuckled humorlessly. "This is Tiantang City. If young Master Yun really intends to keep this dragonhide treasure map, I believe the news won't even leak out. Since the news has spread so far and wide, causing such a huge dispute, young Master Yun must not be interested in this. How can your words just now be boastful? They must be young Master Yun's heartfelt words. There's no room for falsehood." Hen Bieli's words contained a lot of information. It sounded like praise and criticism at the same time. Even those with better brains would have to think twice before they could fully understand it. Yun Yang could only smile bitterly. "If that's the case, should I express my gratitude for head landlord Hen's trust?" Hen Bieli smiled bleakly and said faintly, "How can a person at the end of his rope dare accept young Master Yun's thanks?" His gaze froze as he hollered, "Catch, young Master Yun!" With a flick of his hand, the dragonhide treasure map that had been the center of attention flew up. Everyone could not help but widen their eyes in unison, focusing on the moment. Many of them were secretly accumulating their strength, intending to leap up and snatch it. What a great opportunity this was. The assassin would forfeit, Yutong officials would not snatch it, and their own side would be watching. Wouldn't it be perfect if they snatched it and left? However, when they saw the chilling arrow light on the tens of thousands of deicide bows, everyone's heart skipped a beat, tacitly dismissing the idea. Yutong officials had said that they would not fight for it, but they were still eyeing it hungrily. The risk of making a move now was too great, so it was better to wait. Therefore, countless pairs of eyes were trained on Yun Yang, who was in the air. They wanted to see how Yun Yang would react next, whether he was truly chivalrous, courageous, righteous and honorable. Hong Zhan and the other assassins watched as the dragonhide treasure map flew into the air. Pained expressions appeared on their faces, as if their hearts had been cut by a knife. This was no different from ruthlessly cutting their hearts with a knife. He had given away the rare treasure that he had gotten his hands on, and he could no longer participate in the fight for it. His life was so bleak that it couldn't be any worse. The map slowly rose into the air. Yun Yang stood where he was, not moving at all. The only change was that he had extended his hands slightly. That was all. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that young Master Yun was really not interested in this. If he wanted it too, he wouldn't be so calm right now. No matter what, they had to descend to welcome them. One should not underestimate this slight movement, but what it represented was significant. No matter how calm or pretentious one was, seeing that the dragonhide treasure map fee was about to fall into their hands, they would not be able to stop themselves from welcoming it. Everyone was certain that even if Ling Xiaozue, Dugu Chou, Mr. Nian and the others were here, they would definitely make a move. This was an unprecedented temptation. This was a pie that was bigger than the sky. Getting it meant that they would have the path to heaven. In the face of this dragonhide treasure map, the so-called invincibility of the world was not even worth a mention. It was beneath his notice. What did this mean? However, Yun Yang did not. He even looked annoyed. It was not an act, but a genuine annoyance that came from the bottom of his heart. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the dragonhide treasure map seemed to have flown for a century before it finally landed in Yun Yang's hands. Picking it up with 2 fingers, Yun Yang sighed softly and said, "This is a good thing for those who want it, but to me, it's really just a source of trouble." Without waiting for the crowd to react, he suddenly flipped his wrist and the dragonhide treasure map that he had just obtained flew away with a swoosh. He said faintly, "His Majesty is right. The martial world's matters should be left to the martial world. What belongs to the martial world should belong to the martial world. The martial world's divine item shall not fall into Yutong's hands. Take this treasure map. From now on, don't cause trouble in Tiantang City anymore." The battle for Tiantang City's treasure map ends today. Any more martial artists who cause trouble in Tiantang City by force will not be pardoned. While he was speaking, the dragonhide treasure map had already flown more than a few thousand feet away. Although it was only a split second, it was already filled with countless sword lights and saber auras. Instantly, the whole place was filled with blood, and the blood waves were monstrous. It had only been a split second, but thousands of people had leaped into the air to fight for the treasure. Hundreds of people died instantly. Countless saber light, sword energy, fist energy, and palm skills competed to shine in the air. The stalemate lasted for a moment. Suddenly, someone let out a wild roar and soared into the sky. Then, dozens of rays of light followed closely behind and chased after him. The countless Jianghu cultivators below also soared into the sky without hesitation and chased after him. It had only been a dozen breaths' time, but the land that was covered in blood, severed limbs, and corpses was now empty. Obviously, someone had snatched the dragonhide treasure map and fled at once, while the people behind him gave chase, unwilling to give up. The east side of the city was no longer of any use. It became empty in an instant. The dragonhide treasure map, a huge problem, had been tossed away by Yin Yang. However, in the eyes of many, it was equivalent to giving up a path to heaven. What a reckless waste of a treasure. Despite saying that he had given up, Henbieli's eyes were still locked on the dragonhide treasure map. He watched as it left his hands, watched as it landed in Yun Yang's, watched as Yun Yang tossed it away, watched as the crowd fought for it, watched as they fled. After some time, he sucked in a deep breath and raised his head to tell Yun Yang, "Young Master Yun, Henbieli has never been convinced by anyone in his entire life, but today at this very moment, I'm truly convinced." Yun Yang chuckled bitterly and said bluntly, "Head Hen, you're flattering me. Don't you know that I can't keep the treasure map? Even if I borrow Yutong's military might to intimidate and hold on to this map temporarily, what will happen in the future? I'll only bring endless trouble to myself and even the whole of Yutong. I dare not stay. I dare not." Yun Yang said, "Especially under the circumstances today, I dare not stay." Henbieli thought about it and said, "Young master is wise. It's rare for you to be able to let go." Hong Zhan and the other 3 assassins who were standing aside, looked like they had lost their parents when they heard him. Henbieli raised his head. "Young Master Yun, can we go now?" He did not ask Yun Xiaoyao or General Li, he only asked Yun Yang. He could already tell that Yun Xiaoyao was not unmoved by the idea of making them stay. Yun Yang was the only one who insisted on letting them go. Yun Yang said, "General Li, please order the soldiers to put down their bows and clear a path." Chapter 7:14. General Li's face seemed to be filled with a pained expression. He looked like he was in a dilemma as he said, "Young Master Yun, it's not a problem to make way, but His Highness the Crown Prince." Yun Yang said impatiently, "This has nothing to do with you. I promise on behalf of Henbieli that he won't trouble you after today. As for His Highness the Crown Prince, I'll give him an explanation as well. It still has nothing to do with you. Will that do?" He snorted and said, "As long as he dares to come looking for me." These words were extremely domineering. General Li still looked pained. He sighed and hesitated for a moment before he finally waved his hand. "Put down your bows. Make way." Henbieli let out a long howl and said eerily, "It's enough to put down your bows. I dare not walk the path that His Highness the Crown Prince has made way for." Before his words echoed in the air, he suddenly soared into the air and hollered, "Go!" Hong Zhan and the rest followed suit. The 5 of them soared into the air like 5 giant birds and made a sharp turn in the air, heading towards the south of the city. The 5 of them converged together. Everywhere they passed, they seemed like bolts of lightning, and they drew out long traces in the sky with shocking might. Who were Henbieli and the other 4? Not only were they top assassins, they were also top-notch cultivators. Although Yun Yang had only managed to buy them a moment of buffer time, their injuries were relatively limited. It was only their basic chi that had been depleted. With this gap, their basic chi was replenished. Although they could not recover to their peak combat power, it was not a problem for them to move at high speed. The voices of the 5 men came from afar in unison. "Young Master Yun, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. We shall repay this kindness in the future. From today onwards, we shall not lay a finger on young Master Yun or your people. If you have any orders, the martial world will say so. We will die for them." Their voices were getting further and further away, but they were getting louder and louder. Eventually they were like thunder ringing in the sky above Tiantang City. At this point, there were no martial world people left in the city's east that had been reduced to ruins. General Li, who had been wearing a pained expression, and his subordinates met Yun Yang's gaze and wore meaningful smiles. The pained expressions were finally gone. Yun Yang's voice asked, "Is the person who arranged for you here well?" This was the last test. This time their cooperation was flawless, and it was also a test for that person. However, General Li was not someone Yun Yang was familiar with. General Li said, Lord Wu asked us to send his regards on behalf of the young master if he asks. Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He did not interact with Wu Ying for long. During this period of time they did not meet, merely observing each other. However, Wu Ying's despondent attitude of wanting to do something at the very last moment was obvious. Apart from doing proper business, they were just a bunch of walking corpses. After considering for a long time, Yun Yang finally came to test the waters. Probing wasn't just probing for cooperation. There were other aspects as well. But so far, no other problems have arisen. Military headquarters. General Li came to the door of the deep and serene courtyard. Lord Wu, this subordinate is here to report the completion of the mission. Yes, my lord was right. It was indeed young Master Yun who instructed me to do something. Yes. Greetings to young Master Yun as per your orders. Yes. Do you have any other orders, my lord? No. This subordinate will take his leave. Yes. The conversation was extremely simple. It was as if Wu Ying only knew how to say one word, not a word more. In spite of this, this was how he usually behaved in the military headquarters. If it were not for his personal arrangement, he might not even have uttered a word. Inside, Wu Ying sat in front of the table as usual, carefully organizing the military's files and documents over the years. Beside him were a few booklets that had just been compiled. On Han Sanha. On Qiu Jianhan. On the destruction of the 9 supremes. On the dynasty. On the world's great generals. On generals and ministers. On the thesis. On the martial arts. On the imperial court and the martial world. On the difference between generals and marshals. There were also previous manuscripts and new ideas that Wu Ying had worked overtime during this period of time to tidy them up. The contents of these booklets could be said to be the essence of Wu Ying's lifetime of military knowledge and experience. He had dissected almost all the famous officials and ministers from the past to the present, with Wu Ying's personal understanding and comments included. All the classic battle strategies, and tactics were summarized without missing a single one. There was also the rise and fall of all the empires in Tianshan continent for the past 1,000 years, summarizing them all, pointing to the crucial points and writing down the pros and cons. When I die, these can be of some use to you, Tom. Consider it the last bit of effort that I can do as the manager of the Board of War. Wu Ying murmured to himself. No, perhaps before I die, I should personally find a few suitable successors. If my efforts are left on the shelf, it'll be meaningless. The end of my journey has been revealed. I don't have much time left. If I continue to sit here, it'll only be a waste of time. There's no benefit to it. Why don't I go to the military camp to select bottom-level officers in a few days' time and train them myself? Only I understand what I've written best after all. I might as well go to the academy and see if I can find a few fated students to pass down what I've learned. I can even find a few successors for old Bai's life's work. Wu Ying, who was lost in his thoughts, was lost for a moment. When he snapped back to reality, he could not help looking at the table with a bitter smile. It was the booklet he had just written, the last volume that he had yet to finish. On how Yutong will unite the world. I probably won't be able to see the unification of the world. No matter what, the governance after the world is united will require more talents. I should indeed take in more disciples during my last moments and train some useful talents for Yutong. According to the current state of the continent and the recent changes, Lord Supreme Cloud has dealt with the imperial court, the martial world, the assassins, the sects, the royalty, and many other troubles. I believe that the war of unification will definitely start within the next 3 to 5 years. Therefore, there won't be much time left for me. I have to find the talents that I need as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'll have to manage the various parties once the war starts. Where will I find the time to train them? If I have someone to assist me in these matters, perhaps the efficiency can be greatly increased. My future thoughts can't be entirely placed on the Board of War. For Yutong's future, I have to change. Wu Ying stood up and relayed his orders. Send a few invitations out for me. A few invitations. It was easy to say, but everyone who saw the names of the people invited to attend the meeting couldn't help but feel a jolt in their hearts. The weight of these invitations was simply immeasurable. It was truly earth-shattering. Fang Qingtian, Qiu Jianhan, Leng Daoyin, Taijing, Old Mistress Shangwan. The 5 people who had been invited to the meeting were almost the empire of Yutong's pillars. Including Wu Ying, they had captured all of Yutong's military forces in one fell swoop, on the surface, in the dark, in fact, and even the spiritual leaders, without missing a single one. Wu Ying gripped the last invitation and finally chuckled bitterly. Do I still have the face to see him? He tossed the invitation into the fire, Cloud. There was only one word on the invitation, but it had already disappeared in the flames. Chapter 7:15. Qiu Jianhan and the others were shocked when they received the invitation. The indescribable shock was something they had only experienced a few times in their lives, but today they actually felt intimidated. Each of them had received countless invitations in their lives. Even invitations from the royal family or even from the emperor himself were nothing to them. However, the invitation from this person today was not only unprecedented, it was something that they could never even dream of receiving in their entire lives. These old men could never imagine that this person would actually send them an invitation. Go at once. Old Marshal Qiu made his decision without hesitation. Fang Qingtian, Leng Daoyin, and the others reacted similarly. In fact, all of them felt as if the world was spinning. That ghost-like fellow actually sent out invitations? Discuss something? Could it be that the sky was going to collapse? If that was not the case, how could there be an invitation from him? This was not an ordinary appointment. The few old men were mumbling inwardly. He didn't come when your father is marrying his daughter-in-law, nor did he come when my grandson is getting married. What is he doing this time? Your father almost died last time and he didn't even make a sound. Why is he sending an invitation this time? Has this bastard gone mad? This was Wu Ying's influence. Shocking the world with a single feat was no longer enough to describe it. On the same night, Wu Ying sat before the table. In front of him were 4 marshals and an old mistress. They were all looking at him like they were looking at a rare animal. Wu Ying's expression was stiff, not saying a word. After a while, all 5 of them looked like they had just eaten **tea. What did he mean by inviting us over without saying a word? Ghost, Sir Wu. Qiu Jianhan almost called out the nickname Ghost General that he and the others had given to Wu Ying. He stroked his beard and said, "There must be something important that you've invited us over?" Wu Ying answered. What did he mean by Old Master Qiu turned his head away, panting heavily. Fang Qingtian asked, "What is it?" Wu Ying answered, "Something." He seemed a little distracted. Fang Qingtian fell backward. How could he not know that something was wrong? Tai Jing said, "Sir Wu, please speak frankly." He was here to smooth things over. Wu Ying stopped talking at once, frowning as he pondered. These 5 people. Were they worth entrusting? Would there be any problems? If there was a problem, who would it be? Tai Jing almost pulled out his saber. If someone else asked you a question, you would at least respond with an N, but when I asked you a question, you actually closed your eyes. This was going too far. It's nothing much. I need your help, sirs. Wu Ying snapped out of his daze. The 5 of them snorted and rolled their eyes. Help? With this attitude of yours? Help you my ass. Everyone take a look at this first. Wu Ying stood up and took out all the books he had written himself. He placed them on the table for everyone to read. Qiu Jianhan and the rest had decided that they would not entertain this fellow, but the names of these booklets before them were alluring enough. There's actually someone analyzing me? There are even people who analyze their opponents? Curious, why not take a look first? But with one look it was incredible. He simply couldn't put the booklet down. Wu Ying wanted to speak, but he lifted his head to look. Qiu Jianhan and the rest were looking at each booklet hungrily, like perverts who had seen peerless beauties. After reading one, they picked up another. Each book was like a treasure to them and they could not bear to put it down. These were the embodiment of true talent, the demonstration of successful experiences. If the dragon hide treasure map that carried the legacy of the 17th Master of the Abyss was a divine artifact in the eyes of the martial world, then a divine artifact in the eyes of Yutong's military leaders had been born. Yes, these were the booklets that Wu Ying had given out. He was actually willing to share these booklets. It could no longer be described as simply extravagant. No one was unfamiliar with these things, but this was the first time in history that they were truly integrated into a booklet and analyzed using the same system. Especially when the few old generals were involved, they felt even more enlightened when they read it. Fang Qingtian read a few books and sighed deeply, lifting his head to look at Wu Ying. This was truly a genius. An unparalleled genius. Wu Ying's expression was still cold and stiff, but in the eyes of these people, his face was even more beautiful than a peerless beauty. Amazing. Too amazing. Tai Jing shook his head in admiration as he read. His fingers, which were twice the size of an ordinary person's fingers and resembled the root of a carrot, were flipping through the pages carefully, unable to put them down. There was really no word to praise him, he could only shout out his awesomeness. It did not take long for him to show off for 40 to 50 times. After a while, when everyone had calmed down a little, Wu Ying spoke slowly. Throughout this period of time, I've been reflecting on what I've learned in my life, combining the wisdom and experience of my predecessors to organize and compile these before me. It's estimated that it'll take a long time for all of them to be completed. About half of them aren't done yet. These aren't finalized yet, they still need to be fixed. There are still many parts that can't be understood by the successors if they're simply written in words, so, Wu Ying stuttered a little when he spoke. This was because he rarely interacted with people, but his expression was calm as he said, "So, I'd like to find a few students from the military and the political side. I'll teach them the ways of being an official, the ways of being a person, the ways of war, the ways of socializing, the ways of ruling a country, the ways of unifying, and so on." The few old generals widened their eyes at the same time, their faces agitated. "We agree completely. No objections at all. We'll definitely cooperate fully." As the saying went, a small clue would reveal a big picture. After reading all of this, everyone was even more certain about this ghostly Lord Wu Ying. They had initially thought that this person had the talent to bring peace and stability to the country, but now it seemed that he had the talent to rule the world. He was an all-round talent. He was too amazing. Although these big shots already knew that they might not be able to match up to this ghost general in some aspects before reading these booklets, they were still seniors after all. Moreover, due to his habitual low profile, even if they wanted to promote and cultivate him, it would be difficult for them to do so. However, now that they had experienced Wu Ying's abilities firsthand, the few big shots immediately made up their minds. No matter whether Wu Ying wanted to show his face or not, he had to do so. It was a crime for such a great talent to be buried until now. When they heard that Wu Ying had volunteered to teach students, the few big shots were overjoyed. They were wild with joy. As for whether Wu Ying was boasting or if he was being too arrogant, saying that he would teach them everything he knew, the big shots did not question him at all. The contents of the books that Wu Ying had given them were already of sufficient weight. There was no way they would question him further. The only thing they needed to do was to support him, to give him their full support. Wu Ying lifted his eyelids and said, "Regarding my students, I have some strict requirements. I'll only teach them if they meet those requirements. Firstly, their family background must be clean. Secondly, their character must be passable. Thirdly, there were more than a dozen requirements in total. However, Qiu Jianhan and the others had agreed without hesitation. There was not a single word of objection, not even the slightest hesitation. It was Fang Qingtian who interrupted hesitantly, "Can the children of our families participate in the selection?" Wu Ying answered, "Even the children of gangsters can participate." Fang Qingtian could not help coughing, feeling an urge to fight. "Isn't the way you agreed a little too offensive?" Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin burst out laughing. Old Mistress Shangguan was enthusiastic as well. "Our Shangguan," Wu Ying cut her off, "the teachers of your children are better than me." The corners of old Mistress Shangguan's lips twitched. "Well, I really can't tell." Wu Ying then added, "I dare not snatch his disciple." Old Mistress Shangguan was stunned. Qiu Jianhan was taken aback as well. Among these people, Qiu Jianhan knew about them, but Wu Ying's words carried a deeper meaning. Yesterday's WeChat winner was commoner. This name made me dazed for a moment. Actually, none of us were ordinary people. Who can transcend eating, drinking, defecating day after day, big and small. Chapter 7:16. However, with Wu Ying's ability and talent, it would not be a problem for him to groom half of the empire of Yutong if he were to start a class and take in disciples. The pamphlets that were in front of him were more than enough to prove it. "How many people do you need, specifically?" Leng Daoyin asked. Wu Ying calculated in his mind and said, "There can be 20 people for me to choose from, but no more than 10 can stay. In the end, however, I can only choose one person each for my legacy, one for civil and one for martial." "That's a little too few," Tai Jing said. Wu Ying rolled his eyes. Humph, everyone understood what he meant. This was teaching from the very beginning. Who knew how much effort it would take? 10 people was already a little too many, how could it be considered too few? However, Wu Ying continued, "Other than the 2 I've chosen in the end, even the other 8 who have been eliminated from my side shouldn't be a problem for them to guard one side, conservatively speaking." The quintet's eyes shone. "What are the specific requirements?" Old Mistress Shangguan was more meticulous in her thinking. "The 2 I value the most need to have a family background," Wu Ying said, "otherwise it'll take too long for them to climb up from the bottom." No one had any objections to this. It was a reasonable request to have a high starting point. "As for the other 8, I have no other requirements other than their character," Wu Ying said. "That makes things easier." Qiu Jianhan was the first to voice his opinion. The few of us will help you be the head examiners. You don't have to worry about fairness." The others nodded in agreement. "Then I'll have to trouble all of you to help me." Wu Ying bowed faintly and said, "I know that all of you elders are busy with official duties and even more personal matters. I dare not stay for long. Please leave now." Once he said that, the quintet looked at each other, not knowing how to react. "CK, you invited us here one by one just to give us a mission? You've sent us an invitation, brother. Forget about wine and meat, we can't even get a glass of water when we come here and you're chasing us away. How could there be such a thing in this world? Even if you have talent, great talent, and are amazing. Yes, you are amazing." Fang Qingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Wu Ying, aren't you going to take care of a meal?" Wu Ying lifted his head to look at the old Grand Commandant coldly and said flatly, "Your humble servant has always been poor. Now I don't even have a penny on me. All these years we've been living off the government and wearing the government's clothes. We've taken too many advantages. How can we be greedy?" The implication was, "You want me to treat you to a meal? That's forcing me to be greedy, forcing me to fall." "What do you mean?" The five of them were once again dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. "I'm convinced." Qiu Jianhan said angrily, "This rascal, he really lives up to his name of Wu." The moment he said that, everyone was instantly reminded of the iron-faced Good Samaritan. They could not help glancing suspiciously at Wu Ying's face, thinking to themselves, "CK, don't tell me these two are twins?" They were the two oddities of Yutong's officialdom. "You and Wu Lai?" Leng Daoyin finally asked, "Are brothers?" Wu Ying watched Leng Daoyin's face quietly for a while before he suddenly asked, "Are all those with the surname Leng in this world your brothers?" Leng Daoyin was exasperated. "All of them are my brothers? What kind of nonsense was that?" Leng was not a big star, but there were millions of people in this world. Who could give birth to so many people? This bastard could really choke people to death with his words. Ha! Qiu Jianhan was overjoyed. Wu Ying kept a straight face, his expression unfriendly. "You may leave. I have something to attend to." The five of them were instantly enraged. Even His Majesty could not speak to the five of them like this. It was the first time in their lives that they were asked to leave like this. The five of them stood up angrily and left, cursing and swearing. Fang Qingdan walked to the door and suddenly turned to ask, "That's not right. Your food and clothing are provided by the country. Where is your salary for so many years?" Old Grand Commandant Fang's question came out of the blue, but there was a deeper meaning behind it. Yutong rewarded its soldiers handsomely with rations and salaries. Wu Ying's position was extremely high and he was not burdened by his family. His family should be rich, so why did he not have a single penny? Wu Ying replied, "It's always been kept in the Board of War's account. This lowly official has never used money, so there's no need to withdraw it. I even have to spend it, it's troublesome." Old Grand Commandant Fang's mouth was agape, looking at this ghost-like fellow like he was looking at a deity. After a long time, he closed his mouth with a click and left without a word. There was only one word in his mind: amazing. There was actually someone in this world who did not take a salary just because he was afraid that it would be too troublesome to spend money. The five bosses, who refused to believe it, went to the financial department of the military supplies department and retrieved Wu Ying's salary records. They found out that Wu Ying's salary was indeed not a small sum. He had already accumulated more than 100,000 taels of silver. However, there was no record of him claiming it at all. He was truly a rich man. Qiu Jianhan shook his head and sighed. "I thought he was a god who could rule the world, but he's actually a ghost who has gone into seclusion. He probably won't be able to spend our human money in this lifetime. This old man should quickly go work for him." "I'll go as well. It's more important to go work quickly." The group turned and walked away, filled with admiration. "I say. I guess Sir Wu won't want the money he's saved in the future." Tai Zheng's eyes glowed. "Why don't you give it all to me? Take it." Old Grand Commandant decided right away. Of course, Tai Zheng was not going to spend it for himself. Wu Ying would not use the money anyway, so he might as well let Tai Zheng take it. The families of the martyrs could at least have a few more mouthfuls of food to eat. It was better than leaving them here to collect dust. If it were not for today's meeting, even if Tai Zheng and the other bosses knew that Wu Ying had such a sum of silver taels under his name and knew that he would not use it, they would not have done so either. Now, however, the situation was completely different. Wu Ying was even willing to give away such a precious book that contained his lifetime's worth of knowledge. What was a little bit of silver worth? How could a genius with such a noble character, unquestionable integrity, and magnanimity care about money? Therefore he directly took it away and used it on someone who needed it more. It was the best. Tai Zheng's embezzlement of the money was justified. Yun Yang soon found out about Wu Ying's actions. Facing Shui Wuyin's questioning gaze, Yun Yang was silent for a long time. "Boss, how should we handle this?" "Let him be." Yun Yang sighed. Shui Wuyin was rather reluctant. "But, he's one of the culprits. We can't just let him be, can we?" Although Shui Wuyin did not say it out loud, he was more or less indignant that Yun Yang had spared Wu Ying the last time. The only difference between his mentality and Yun Yang's was that Yun Yang would sometimes choose to prioritize the bigger picture under certain conditions. Shui Wuyin, on the other hand, was much more straightforward. If one had done a bad thing, one would be a bad person for life. One should be killed. It had to be said that such thinking was rather extreme. "Let him be." Yun Yang said, "You have to assist him in finding his disciples. You must investigate the background of these disciples and ensure that they are pure." Shui Wuyin heaved a deep sigh. He did not speak for a long time. Yun Yang frowned. "Is there a problem?" "I only have one request." Shui Wuyin said boldly, "When Wu Ying dies in the future, no matter how he dies, I want to see his corpse. If I could mobilize them, wouldn't I have?" These were heartfelt words. Although the Crown Prince's sixth command consisted of only about 10,000 men, they were the most elite combat force in Yutong's army. Be it their cultivation base or their weapons and equipment, they were the cream of the crop. However, it was only a title. Even the Crown Prince himself had never thought of attacking this army. He didn't dare to, because none of them really listened to the Crown Prince. Otherwise, even if it was a sneak attack, even if it was an opportunity to strike, even if the target was exhausted, how could it be possible to annihilate so many top-notch assassins with 3 volleys of arrows? If these people really listened to His Highness the Crown Prince's orders, His Highness the Crown Prince would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. He really wanted it to be a reality. "But, someone invite General Li here. I have something to ask him." His Highness's face slowly turned menacing. "Your Highness," General Li said, "he's busy with military affairs. Your Highness's arrangements have been completed. It's a waste of time to travel back and forth. Your Highness, please don't be so courteous. There's plenty of time for rewards and whatnot." The Crown Prince was furious. "The arrangements I've made have been completed? There's no need to be courteous? There's even a reward? Bastard." His Highness sprung up and roared, "This is framing. This is fabricating something out of nothing. This is slandering the prince. This is a huge scapegoat on my head. How can there be a future for me?" His Highness was about to go mad. How could he admit to such a thing? Even if he really wanted to do so, he would never have said it so clearly. "You've done it, there's plenty of time for you to do it. Not to mention that I didn't give you any orders. Even if it was really my intention, how can you explain yourself by letting 5 of the scariest assassins escape? I'm the one who invited them here. Now it's me who wants to kill them, and I've already killed tens of thousands of their brothers. Such an irreconcilable feud has been planted on me. Even jumping into the Lunar River won't be able to wash it clean. From now on, almost everyone in this world won't have to worry about assassins anymore, but I, the Crown Prince, will have to live in fear day and night. There's still me to be afraid of. Hen Bieli, Hong Zhan, or even the 5 peerless assassins working together to assassinate him at any time, anywhere, and at any moment." His Highness's face was contorted as he roared and cursed in a frenzy. Now, His Highness had basically become a general without an army. Other than a few rotten scholars, the rest did not have the slightest bit of strength left. His strategists were killed one by one. His teachers were killed. His guards, those who could be considered experts, were all wiped out. The Crown Prince thought about it carefully and was shocked to find that the only person he could discuss something with was the Crown Princess. Unknowingly, the talents around him, the heir to the Eastern Palace, had withered. There was no one he could use. "Your Highness, this is obviously a trap set by His Majesty King Xiaoyao and the military." The Crown Princess looked worried. Other than being unsure if His Majesty is unaware of it or has acquiesced, the military and King Xiaoyao are definitely involved. The Crown Prince asked blankly, "Why is that?" The Crown Princess answered, "How can your Highness not see the current situation? What they're doing is nothing more than clearing a path for someone. Your Highness is the rightful heir to the throne of Yutong. How can you not be their biggest obstacle?" The Crown Prince said, "That's right. This must have been planned by Yun Yang, Tai Zheng, and the others. They want to force me into a dead end. What a wild ambition." The Crown Princess lowered her head and said, "Now that the situation is dire, it's useless to pursue the matter. Your Highness, the situation is clear now. It's over and your position as the heir to the Eastern Palace is fated to be lost. If you continue to force it, I'm afraid you'll have to pay with your life as well. Your Highness, please plan for a retreat as soon as possible. It's more important to preserve your life. The Crown Princess looked defeated as well, but she could see things clearer than the Crown Prince. She knew that her man had no chance of Yutong's throne anymore. If he persisted, it would only be the end of the game. There was no chance at all. Recalling the time when she had just become the Crown Princess, she had dreamed of being the mother of the world and standing side by side with the Crown Prince more than once. Now, no, it had been a long time since she had given up on this extravagant hope. The Crown Prince heaved a long sigh. The problem is, even if I'm willing to defile myself and abandon my position as the Crown Prince, it's hard to keep my life. They've let go of the 5 pinnacle assassins in this world this time, and the biggest enemy of these 5 assassins is me. This battle has cut off my future and my life. The Crown Prince seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. I have nowhere else to go. Chapter 7:18. The Crown Prince was distraught and filled with fear. It was too terrifying. Who knew when he would be decapitated with a single slash and lose his life? Such a possibility had been thoroughly imprinted in the Crown Prince's mind, giving him the urge to cry out loud just thinking about it. Indeed, facing the ambush of 5 top-notch assassins at any time, it was difficult to be safe even if he hired Ling Xiaozue and Gudu Chou as his bodyguards. No matter how good the bodyguards were, they could only protect him for a while, but could they protect him forever? Yet, the enmity between the Crown Prince and Hen Bieli and the rest was irreconcilable. The 100,000 assassins were all dead, killed by the martial artists. However, His Highness the Crown Prince's final move was enough for the 5 top assassins to pin all their hatred on the Crown Prince. Furthermore, it was deeply rooted. The Crown Princess sighed, looking at the Crown Prince pitifully. He had long known that it was impossible, yet he still held on to his wild thoughts and refused to give in, struggling blindly on the brink of death. Now, all his escape routes had been completely cut off. All his escape routes had been cut off as well. What else could he do? Now that things had come to this, who could he blame? However, it's not like there's no way out of this situation. The Crown Princess sighed. At this moment, there's still one person who can turn the situation around and save our lives. His Highness perked up upon hearing that. Oh, is it Father? It's a pity that even Father can't do anything to Hen Bieli and the rest. The Crown Princess said slowly, I'm not talking about Father but Yun Yang, young Master Yun. The Crown Princess's words were earth-shattering. His Highness was stunned and speechless for a moment. His Highness the Crown Prince has come to visit? Yun Yang looked at Lao Mei, the corners of his eyes and brows filled with surprise. Yes. Invite him in. A meaningful smile hung on the corners of Yun Yang's lips. The arrival of the visitor was unexpected, but how could it not be reasonable when one thought about it? Yun Xiaoyao looked at Yun Yang, his lips moving before he finally sighed and said, You handle it. I have to excuse myself. What if His Highness the Crown Prince hugged his thigh and begged for mercy? What should he do? No matter what, he was still the Crown Prince's uncle, his blood relative. Although there is a saying that people need face and trees need bark, isn't it true that a person's conscience is also a sense of shame? Why can't they do it? Yun Yang smiled faintly. Very well, you may go ahead. He said leisurely, I have a lot of experience in dealing with this guy. You only want to live? Yun Yang looked at His Highness the Crown Prince in front of him. His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong was like a rooster that had completely lost its fight, completely devoid of spirit. Yes. The Crown Prince's eyes were lifeless and he was emaciated. Only 2 nights had passed, but the Crown Prince, who was originally as handsome as jade, suddenly seemed to have aged 30 to 50 years. Even the hair on his temples had turned white. The goal that he had fought for half of his life, he had thought that it was close at hand and within his reach, but in a single night, it disappeared without a trace. His Highness the Crown Prince had never been one with a strong will to begin with. Naturally, he could not bear such a heavy blow. If it were not for Yun Yang's life-saving straw, he would have either committed suicide in a few more days or he would have gone mad from depression to insanity. Live. Yun Yang mused. The Crown Prince said, I've written the memorial, requesting to be demoted to the position of Crown Prince. I've even found excuses for myself. No talent, no virtue, no character, no looks, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, rebelling against the superiors, bullying men and women, a man's unmentionable illness. His Highness the Crown Prince was really going all out, even using the excuse of a man's unmentionable illness. His sincerity was overwhelming. However, he had to do it. The emperor had already agreed that the martial world's conflict would take place in the east of the city, but he had ordered to intervene. Although the truth was that he had been framed, the crown prince knew that he could not escape from it. With so many people working together, the board of military and the government had already joined hands. Even if it was black, it had to be white. There was no need for any evidence, nor was there any hope of turning the tables. The crown prince's expression was blank. I only hope that young Master Yun can save my life. Everything else is inconsequential. Yunyang said faintly, I've seen your highness' sincerity, but there's one more charge that you haven't mentioned. This alone is insufficient sincerity. His Highness the Crown Prince lifted his head abruptly. What charge? What charge? I'll just admit to it. Why didn't you mention a word about the murder of the 9 Supremes? Even if you've listed 1,000 charges, how can you talk about sincerity if you don't mention this? Yun Yang's gaze was like lightning, his words sharp as a sword. His Highness the Crown Prince felt as if he had been struck by lightning upon hearing his words. He felt dizzy and his mouth was agape, unable to speak for a moment. He looked at Yun Yang in horror, his face pale. Yun Yang's cold gaze met the Crown Prince's and said, Don't misunderstand me. I'm trying to trick you. The murder of the 9 Supremes has been investigated by many parties and there's a conclusion to it. However, you're connected to every single party. Although you've been used by the various forces throughout the entire process, ultimately becoming a passive puppet who has been deceived by the Four Seasons Tower, who thinks highly of himself, who thinks that he's in control of the entire situation. You think that you're the one in charge of the battle at Tianshan Mountain, but in fact, every step of your plan has been pushed by others, intentionally or unintentionally. However, you've still done this. Your malice towards the 9 Supremes is real, it's not fake at all. The Crown Prince's face was as white as a sheet, his gaze filled with panic. I only have one question for you. Why did you plot against the 9 Supremes? What's the reason? Yin Yang asked in a low voice. You are the heir to the throne. No matter how powerful the 9 Supremes are, no matter how reputable they are, the empire they conquer will ultimately belong to you. It can be said that they are conquering the empire for you. Yun Yang asked in confusion, why do you want to destroy your own empire? Give me a reason. This was what Yun Yang was most confused about. The Four Seasons Tower's motive for plotting against the 9 Supremes was obvious. However, the Crown Prince's plotting against the 9 Supremes had almost dragged his own country into a swamp and was on the brink of annihilation. This was inexplicable and confusing. The Crown Prince hung his head low. After a long time he said hoarsely, I saw Big Brother during the New Year that year. Yun Yang frowned. The Crown Prince covered his entire face. Back then, Father had already spread the news a few years ago that Big Brother had died of a sudden illness. But I saw Big Brother, alive and well, outside Father's royal study. I was stunned then, stunned for a long time. That night, Imperial Father was dead drunk. He looked at me, his eyes filled with reluctance and unwillingness. He only said one sentence before he was completely drunk and unconscious. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath. What did His Majesty say? Chapter 719. Yun Yang's expression changed when he heard the explanation. This was the so-called reason. The emperor had actually let it slip. Furthermore, it had been leaked to someone who should never have known, His Highness the Crown Prince, the party involved. At that time there was no one else around and the nearest person was several feet away. Father's words were very vague. No one heard it except for me. But at that time I was stunned again, just like the moment when I accidentally saw Big Brother. No, I was just panicking and at a loss. Hearing Father's words, I felt like I was struck by lightning, unable to calm down. Yin Yang sighed. You don't have to go on. He finally understood. Everything was clear now. The emperor had always had such a plan in his heart. Then it was no wonder. Honestly, this plan was easy to execute. As long as the world was unified and the world was completed, this world would belong to Yutong's territory. Then the eldest prince's identity as one of the 9 Supremes would no longer be a secret. The fact that the eldest prince was the leader of the 9 Supremes, Supreme Earth, would be a bright light in Yutong's conquest of the world. At that time, all he had to do was to issue an imperial edict at the right time, stating the reason why the news of the first prince's sudden death was spread all those years ago. After making such a huge sacrifice, it was completely logical for the first prince to return and ascend to the throne today. None of Yutong's subjects and people would object to it. There was only one person who was an exception. His Highness the Crown Prince, the heir to the East Palace on the surface. It was then that His Highness the Crown Prince knew about His Majesty's plan. His title as the Crown Prince was only a decoration on the surface. Yunyang heaved a long sigh. Looking down at the old and desolate Crown Prince, he was speechless and conflicted. Should he kill or not kill the Crown Prince? To kill or not to kill, it all depended on Yunyang's decision. Logically speaking, the Crown Prince deserved to die for what he had done. However, if one were to consider his position and position, his choice would be detrimental to the country and disloyal to the emperor, but it was understandable for him. It was only right for the heir of the royal family to do whatever it took to ascend to the throne. It was only right that the winner took all. Come to think of it, it was the Crown Prince's downfall today, but if he had perished at Tianshan Cliff that day and had not saved the poisoned Emperor of Yutong, the position of the next Emperor of Yutong might have long fallen to the Crown Prince. By then, whether Yutong would be annexed or destroyed by other countries, His Highness the Crown Prince would have won the War of Succession. For a moment, Yunyang's thoughts were a jumbled mess. It was difficult for him to make a decision. In a trance, he felt as if two pairs of eyes were watching him from afar. Old Ninth, my brother, is still my brother. Supreme Earth's words. Supreme Earth did not say it out loud. However, since he was willing to make such a sacrifice for his country and family, he probably wouldn't want to see his younger brother die in his own hands, right? But, what about the other brothers? There's still a way out if you want to live. A cold glint flashed across Yunyang's eyes. His gaze was misty because the 8-masked silhouettes seemed to have slipped past his eyes just a moment ago. His decision was made in that instant. He enunciated each word clearly, no matter what, you have to die once first before we can talk about the future. Having been the Crown Prince for so long, the Crown Prince naturally understood the deeper meaning behind Yunyang's words. Without hesitation, he nodded and said, I will follow young Master Yun's arrangements. Faking one's death and hiding one's identity to deal with the current situation was the best solution. However, with the Crown Prince's current capability, it would be difficult to complete it, not to mention the countless hidden dangers. However, if this plan were to be arranged by Yunyang, it would be a completely different matter. The success rate would increase tremendously. At the end of this situation, perhaps His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong would perish from this world, but he could continue to live. At this moment, the Crown Prince felt that he had understood everything and could feel Yunyang's kindness and sincerity. Yunyang nodded and said nothing more. Watching the Crown Prince walk out of the residence of Yun with his back hunched, Yunyang could clearly feel that this matter had finally come to an end. This Crown Prince who had been a decoration in the Empire of Yutong for years, the heir to the Eastern Palace, was truly disheartened and had no more lingering feelings. However, could it be that I've schemed and schemed so many times just for you to be disheartened? Yunyang stood with his arms behind his back. Smoke flashed across his eyes, eventually turning into a tinge of viciousness. It was an indescribable menace. Yun Xiaoyao walked out from behind the screen and let out a long sigh. King Yun could not help but let out the desire to sigh in his heart. Yunyang, what are you doing? What is your ultimate goal after going through so much trouble? King Xiaoyao looked melancholy and puzzled. The situation had basically come to an end. Yunyang had gained a lot from this battle. He had killed Ouyang Shaoxi, whom he had to kill, and wiped out 99% of the world's top-notch assassins. He had even taken the opportunity to knock down the Crown Prince of Yutong, but the price he had to pay was equally great. Just the Dragonhide treasure map alone had made Yun Xiaoyao wringing his hands and sighing endlessly. Especially now that Yunyang had shifted the attention of the 5 top-notch assassins to the Crown Prince, it was a beautiful move, but it inevitably made some people unhappy. That some people here were probably referring to the Emperor of Yutong and Yun Xiaoyao himself. What is it? Yunyang asked with a smile. Haven't you gone too far? The bloodline of the royal family? Yun Xiaoyao sighed. After this battle, the Crown Prince has been completely wiped out by you. The 3rd Prince has also been crippled by you, and he's even been driven mad by fear. The 4th Prince, although we're at peace for now, I don't think you'll let him go. There's also the 5th and 6th Princes. These 2 fellows have been recruiting too smoothly during this period of time. Although I don't know the exact situation, I can still be sure that all of this is your doing. I even suspect how many of their so-called subordinates actually listen to them. Can there be even half of them? I'm not surprised that you've targeted the Crown Prince, the 3rd Prince, and even the 4th Prince, but the 5th Prince is only 13 this year, and the 6th Prince is only 12. Yun Xiaoyao said, aren't you being a little too ruthless when you've already started planning to target them? I didn't hide any of this from you, Yunyang said faintly. Yun Xiaoyao sighed. Yes, if you didn't want me to know, I probably wouldn't even be able to get these tiny clues. So I think you've probably made corresponding arrangements for the other princes, haven't you? It's better to prepare for a rainy day than to nip it in the bud. Yunyang was still nonchalant about it. Everything you've done is to pave the way for Bao to avoid all possible accidents? Yun Xiaoyao asked. It's true that I've paved the way for him, but it's another matter to avoid all possible accidents, Yunyang said honestly. After all, there are still some things that I don't want to do. If I were to do all of them, it would be truly paving the way for him. Oh? Yun Xiaoyao asked. Yunyang waved his arms and said, actually, the source of these princes' ambitions all comes from the harem. Yun Xiaoyao shuddered when he heard him and exclaimed, what do you want to do? Don't you dare mess around. My royal brother won't let you do as you please. Chapter 720. Yun Xiaoyao closed his eyes and sucked in a deep breath. It was true that not everyone could stop Yunyang now. At least, no one in the empire of Yutang could, whether it was Yun Xiaoyao or Yutang's emperor, Yu Peiza. As long as he wanted to do something, Yunyang would accomplish it even if the entire empire of Yutang banded together to stop him. It had already come to this. I've done what I can. Yunyang said, everything else will be left to bear fruit in the future. Yun Xiaoyao said, have you ever thought that Bao doesn't live up to your expectations and can't live up to your expectations? No matter how you teach him, he won't grow up to be what we want him to be. What then? Yunyang said, nothing. Let him squander as he pleases as long as the empire that the 9 supremes have painstakingly built isn't lost to an outsider. He grinned. That's enough. He laughed. Didn't the elders build the empire and earn the fortune to pass it on to their descendants? If the descendants can live up to expectations, they can defend it and develop it. If they can't, shouldn't they be defeated by him as well? Yunyang laughed heartily. How can the empire that his father and uncle fought for be given to others? When the one who built the empire wants to retreat, who else should the ready-made empire be given to if not him? If not him, who else should be defeated? Besides, like you said, it's still uncertain what he'll look like. Who knows, he might be a saint throughout the ages, a strong grandfather who surpasses his ancestors. Who can say for sure? Yun Xiaoyao could only sigh after he said that, not saying anything else. After I die, it doesn't matter how my property and my son are ruined, it doesn't matter. This was probably what Yunyang was thinking at the moment. Be it carefree or selfish, it was sincere and directed at his heart. Yun Xiaoyao had gone into closed-door cultivation. He needed some time to digest Yunyang's words. In addition, he was extremely conflicted. Yunyang had nothing to hide at this point, but a difficult problem had been left for Yun Xiaoyao. Should he tell His Majesty the Emperor? Why was this multiple-choice question placed before him all the time, forcing him to choose? Each time he had chosen this side. Yun Xiaoyao sighed in his study. Have the 10 Yama kings and Fang Mafei returned yet? Yunyang asked Lao Mei. No, there's no news yet, but it's still within the permitted time, Lao Mei replied. Yes. Yunyang did not speak anymore. He closed his eyes, deep in thought. The next morning, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince submitted a memorial, admitting that he had no talent and no virtue, and requested to be removed from the position of Crown Prince. Looking at the Crown Prince's letter, the Emperor was stunned for a long time. The expression on his face was complicated. There was relief, understanding, pain, and reluctance. But in the end he waved his brush and approved the request. Then he conferred the former Crown Prince the title of King Anil and granted him Dragon City. Dragon Sealing City was located in the south of Yutang, 27,000 miles away from the capital, Tiantang City. It would take at least a year for an ordinary person to go back and forth between the two places. His Majesty considered it for a long time before issuing another order: depart for the fiefdom within a month. After that, he was not allowed to return without the imperial edict. From receiving the request, approving the request, conferring the title of king and assigning the fiefdom, there were few obstructions throughout the entire process. His Majesty did not even ask for the opinions of the officials. It was as if he was just going through the motions, asking a few questions and deciding everything. It was a completely arbitrary decision. Many of the officials in the imperial court were puzzled, but those who were truly in high positions took it as a matter of course and had no doubts at all. They did not get involved throughout the entire process and did not speak a word. They did not even say a word to mediate the situation. This was a first in the history of Tianshan continent. It was unknown if there would be no one to repeat it, but it was definitely unprecedented. When Yunyang heard the news, there was no change in his expression. He could only smile faintly. His Majesty has really put in a lot of effort. He's trying to protect his son's life. Shengguan Lingxiu, who was beside him, said, His Majesty is a parent as well. This is only reasonable. It's not surprising. Yunyang smiled and said, But not everyone can protect the second prince's life. His Majesty's painstaking effort will inevitably be in vain. Forget it, let's go see Bao and the rest. It's been a while since I've trained with them. Do I need to explain that the second prince is the dethroned crown prince? In the backyard of the residence of Yun. Bao was still young, still a child, but he had grown a head taller in this 1 year. He already looked like a young teenager. At this moment, a little person dressed in a white brocade robe was holding a book in his hand, his eyes glued to it without blinking. Beside the little person was a teacher who was explaining in detail to him. Behind Bao, there were a few other children who were reading as well. However, their frowns were a clear indication of their dislike of books. Prosperity, the people suffer. Death, the people suffer. Bao recited and said, Since prosperity and death are all suffering, how can one not suffer? Beside him, the scholar smiled and said, Prosperity and death are all suffering, they have different meanings. Death, of course, doesn't need to be considered. It's the fall of a nation, of course, suffering. Prosperity, however, doesn't mean prosperity, it means rising. Since there are people who rise, there are people who fall. Similarly, the rise of a nation will be accompanied by the fall of another nation. This process is all suffering. Therefore, prosperity and death are all suffering. However, if a nation can be at peace for a long time, the people won't have to suffer. The hearts of the people are the most simple. As long as they have food to eat, they won't complain about suffering. Then, how can a nation be at peace for a long time? Bao frowned, his young face filled with doubt and pity. How can everyone have a good meal? A clear voice rang with a smile. Peace and stability for a long time is a huge problem. It requires at least the efforts of a few generations. It was Yun Yang's voice. Uncle Yun. Bao called out happily and was about to charge towards the voice. For some reason, he held himself back and looked at the two teachers in front of him, obviously waiting for their signal. Go on. The teachers chuckled. Only then did Bao rush over and reach Yun Yang's side in a flash, hugging his arm. Yun Yang squatted down and picked up Bao's tiny frame, continuing to explain with a chuckle, Only with the tireless efforts of a few generations can the nation prosper and the people be at peace. Every citizen can have a good meal. The first emperor who founded the nation and established the dynasty had many things to do. The second-generation emperor mostly focused on recuperation. The third-generation emperor guarded the foundation and hid the wealth from the people. Only when it came to the fourth-generation emperor's rule can the nation be at peace and the people be well fed and clothed. However, if this can go on for a long time, the world will truly not be suffering. Yunyang looked into Bao'er's eyes and said, Bao'er, how to make the world not suffer is truly a great knowledge. You have to learn well and put it into action. Only then will the people and the world be blessed. Bao'er asked, then how should I do it? How do I start? Chapter 721. Bao'er asked in bewilderment, wouldn't it be exhausting to learn so much? Yunyang could not help but chuckle. It's only natural for a superior to know more. Of course, when the time comes, you only need to do one thing. Bao'er asked, when? Which knowledge? Yunyang smiled without saying a word. After a while he said softly, actually, the world is a family. If you want your family not to be bullied, to be fed and clothed, to be free from suffering, you only need one knowledge. If you want everyone in the world to be fed and clothed, you only need one knowledge. Bao'er seemed to understand, blinking his big eyes in confusion. The two teachers did not comment on Yunyang's teachings, but they looked like they were listening attentively as well. Hearing Yunyang's words, however, they were suddenly shaken. Of course, they understood what Yunyang was saying, but there were some things that they dared not say. He only muttered, one knowledge, one knowledge. I only need one knowledge. They could not help but think. Looking at Yunyang's gaze, they could not help but feel a little strange. Bao'er was still too young. Yunyang had long prohibited him from getting involved in politics. What Yunyang was doing now, however, was planting seeds in Bao'er's heart, becoming one with him, waiting for them to sprout and grow. There were some things that they dared not say or could not understand, but Yunyang's words were enough to make it clear. However, the premise was that those who understood would understand, while those who did not would only walk another path. Could Bao'er really understand? Looking at Bao'er's contemplative face, the two teachers could not help chuckling bitterly. Understand? Only now did he realize that as teachers, We really don't even dare to ask the 3 words, do we understand? Bauer, you only need to know that the word home is enough. To an ordinary citizen, home is a family of 3 or 4 people. To a king, what is home? Bauer might not have understood this, but the 2 teachers felt like they had been struck by lightning as they lifted their heads to look at Yunyang. It was confirmed. Today Yunyang was not here to teach Bauer, but to teach the 2 of them as teachers. What is home? The 2 Confucian scholars suddenly felt a heavy weight on their hearts. And, seeing that Shangguan Lingxiu had arrived, the other children crowded around her as well, tugging at her hands and complaining, "Auntie, what's the use of us learning all that nonsense here? Letting us go back to train is the right thing to do. Staying alive on the battlefield is our top priority. What can these books do?" Shangguan Lingxiu was initially all smiles as she watched the learning atmosphere, but her expression darkened when she heard this. "Nonsense. What do you mean by a nuisance? Deciding the outcome of a battle from 1,000 miles away is a military principle. Are you really not going to move? If you dare to spout nonsense again, even if your teacher doesn't care about you, you will still be punished according to the family rules." The children immediately hung their heads dejectedly, but no one dared to retort. Family rules? The Shangguan family of generals' discipline was not something an ordinary person could endure. They were all dispirited. Yunyang could not help but be amused by the situation. He could not blame Shangguan Lingxiu for throwing a tantrum. These young fellows from the Shangguan family were all good fighters. Fighting in a group was like eating honey. They did not slack off even when they were studying military books and scrolls. Only the knowledge in books and the path of the sage had left them numb. During this period of time in the residence of Yun, he had been tormented to the point of whining every day. Even if there was some improvement, the improvement was extremely limited and negligible. They were indeed the children of the Shangguan family of generals, living up to the name family of generals. There's no rush, there's no rush. Yun Yang comforted her. The heirs of the Shangguan family of generals should have the Shangguan family's nature. The reason I've taken them in here is firstly to learn as much as I can, secondly to pave a new path for their future. Thirdly, it's to train their temperament. There are actually other reasons, but it will only be beneficial to them. There's no need to be overly concerned about their nature. After all, their positions in the future will be in the board of military or the battlefield. Yun Yang said, besides, the Shangguan family of generals will have no worries in the future. No worries in the future. Shangguan Lingxiu mumbled the words, unable to hold back a mixture of sadness and joy. No worries in the future. How many years had it been since the Shangguan family of generals had struggled with these words like a nightmare? Now that it had been completely resolved in Yun Yang's hands, they no longer had to worry about the future. It was a permanent solution. Recalling the new path that Yun Yang had mentioned earlier, the Shangguan family of generals might really be able to prosper forever with the foundation that these young fellows had laid here in the residence of Yun. Of course, there was still a precondition: no rebellion. Putting everything else aside, just the childhood friends that the Shangguan family of generals had with Bao would not be a problem. Therefore, Shangguan Lingxiu, who had always shouldered the heavy responsibility of the family of generals, could finally let go of the family's burden. The sudden feeling of relief almost made her cry tears of joy. Among these 6 nephews of yours, only 4 of them can really go to the battlefield in the future. Yun Yang spoke to Shangguan Lingxiu through voice transmission. The other 2 are the ones who play dumb. It's best for them to be in the board of military in the future. You understand. You understand. How could Shangguan Lingxiu not understand? She spoke to Yun Yang through voice transmission, choking with sobs. I understand, I really do. I'm already very content now. But do you know how I wish that the number you're talking about could be reversed? Yun Yang was speechless. The 3 children of the Shangguan family of generals came forward together, very angry. Annie, you're crying. Who bullied you? Let's go beat him to death. Another one was hesitant, stopping there and pretending to read a book. The other 2 glanced at each other before lowering their heads to focus on their books. Yun Yang and Shangguan Lingxiu watched closely as the 6 children reacted differently in the face of the sudden incident. They all had different expressions. Yun Yang's expression was one of deep thought. Shangguan Lingxiu was comforted. Only Bao rubbed his palms together and said, "Who dares bully my uncle?" Shangguan Lingxiu rolled her eyes. Bully your uncle? Would the entire continent's population be enough? In the palace, His Majesty had purposely asked Qiu Jianhan to stay after handling the national affairs. Since the Battle of the Fortress of Resilience, Qiu Jianhan had been in a coma. Every time His Majesty wanted to talk to someone to relieve his boredom, he realized in shock that he had no one to keep him around. He had been rather lonely for quite some time. Now that Qiu Jianhan had finally woken up and had fully recovered, the emperor could not help but revert to his usual self amidst his delight. Perhaps he had summoned old Marshal Qiu more frequently than before, asking him to stay for a chat almost every day after the court session ended. The situation made Qiu Jianhan groan incessantly. Who could stand having to work overtime every day? Others could knock off at the appointed time, but he had to work for a few more hours every day. It did not seem to be a good thing to have too much of the emperor's grace. You often ask for this old man's company, but why don't you give me a higher salary? You're ordering me around for nothing, Qiu Jianhan grumbled inwardly, but his face was serious. What orders does your majesty have? I am strict in everything and follow the law in everything. I have no mercy. Can the second prince's life be spared? His majesty was an understanding man going straight to the point. I'll say a few extra words here. Words from the heart. Country. Family. I've been a soldier, I've been educated, but I don't understand this problem myself. Therefore this chapter is not a lecture. I think I have 2 points. If the country needs me, I can go to the battlefield and do whatever it takes. If the family needs me, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to go against everything. Therefore I'm a little lost when I write this. When my family is bullied, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to suffer for it. There's no doubt about this. If the country is bullied, I feel that, to a certain extent, I'll give it all. However, when it's not to a certain extent, I might have the thought of peace. However, when I think of it this way, I feel that it doesn't match the theme of this book. Yet this is my true self. Writing up to this point is also the end of my career's confusion. Therefore, the next book will not be about family and country. Chapter 722. Qiu Jianhan was taken aback, rolling his eyes inwardly. You're asking me about this? How would I know? Besides, what's the use of being strict and impartial? Your Majesty, why do you say so? This old official does not understand your Majesty's meaning. Please enlighten me, Qiu Jianhan said. Is Supreme Cloud determined to kill him? The emperor asked. Is it possible to let him go? Qiu Jianhan's forehead was sweating. How would this old official know? Ask for me, the emperor said without hesitation. Qiu Jianhan was stunned. This old official, where should I ask? Ask for you? Who can help me ask then? Don't you know that Supreme Cloud has always been elusive? Only he can find someone. Who can find him? The emperor said, this is settled then. Go and ask. Well, second has given up everything, he has nothing left. Why must he be so ruthless? No matter what, he is still my blood. Qiu Jianhan wanted to say more, but his majesty had already asked him to leave. Go. I know you have a way. I believe in you. Qiu Jianhan left the palace gate in bewilderment. This matter. How should he explain it? Although it was not common for an emperor to encounter unreasonable officials, it was still a common occurrence. For example, Emperor of Yutang's 3 most trusted officials, Qiu Jianhan, Leng Daoyin and Fang Qingtian, were all shrewd with age and eventually became the perfect example of rogues. Therefore the Emperor of Yutang had a way to deal with rogues. Furthermore, he had even more ways to deal with other rogues. What was the most effective way to deal with rogues? Rogues usually had the upper hand, but when rogues met rogues, it was a matter of who was more roguish. His Majesty was saying, I don't want to be reasonable, so what if I don't want to be reasonable? Qiu Jianhan was very tired mentally. As the saying went, a hero's background was not important, while a roguish age was not important. Now, Qiu Jianhan really wanted to say that a roguish background was not important at all. What should a courtier do when encountering an unreasonable and hooligan emperor? Sigh. Qiu Jianhan truly felt as if he had aged decades in this afternoon. He sighed endlessly when he got home, feeling helpless and helpless. Old gangster Qiu was truly at a loss. He wanted to give in and compromise, but could he really ask? That was clearly impossible. At such a delicate time, he believed that the emperor had long since paid attention to his every move. Even if he went to the toilet to take a bath or change his clothes, he would still be closely watched. If he were to look for Yunyang now, the only outcome would be to expose Yunyang. There was no such thing as a fluke. If Supreme Cloud's identity was exposed, Qiu Jianhan dared not imagine what would happen next. Therefore, when he returned home, other than sighing and feeling helpless, he did not do anything else. Then he sighed inwardly. Once it came to the matter of his own bloodline, even the wisest emperor would be blinded by a leaf. Did the Emperor of Yutang really not know the possible consequences of exposing Supreme Cloud's identity? He obviously knew, but he still chose to force himself to think of a solution. He was still willing to believe that Supreme Cloud had the ability to deal with any crisis. Currently, his priority was to save his son's life, even if his son was not worth saving. As a ruler, as a parent, there were many things that one could not help but be selfish even when they knew the truth. Old Gangster Chio as a subject understood this, but he could only sigh helplessly. Compared to old Marshal Chio's helplessness, this period of time was a rare period of relaxation for Yun Yang. After the incident, everything had been settled. For a time there was nothing to worry about. His country was at peace and he was at ease. Therefore he was left to polish his martial arts skills in the residence of Yun. It had become a routine for him to spar with Ji Lingxi every day, at least 3 to 5 times a day. Although Yun Yang's cultivation base was improving with each passing day, the endless divine art was progressing steadily, and he had Emmy's return as well as the help of his cheat. It was still insignificant compared to Ji Lingxi's improvement. Ji Lingxi did not even need to use the red light shield now. She could beat Yun Yang into submission with her own cultivation base alone. In spite of this, Yun Yang was not discouraged. He would rest and recuperate immediately when he was defeated, studying his techniques in between. When he had recovered and felt that he had improved, he would fight Ji Lingxi again. Ji Lingxi did not have much interest in such a contest in the beginning. After all, there was a great disparity between them. Her cultivation base had truly improved by leaps and bounds. No matter how flawless Yun Yang's techniques were, it was difficult for him to escape defeat when faced with an unparalleled force that was difficult to defend against. However, as they fought, she grew more and more spirited. After all, Ji Lingxi's cultivation base was growing too rapidly. Her state of mind, especially in actual combat, was far from being able to match it. Although Yun Yang's attack was weak, his recovery ability was astounding. He was the perfect sparring partner for Ji Lingxi to completely absorb the sudden increase in cultivation base and use it for her own. In addition, Ji Lingxi also wanted to see how long her strange method of cultivation base growth would last and how far it would go before it was complete. Now, Ji Lingxi could feel that her current cultivation base had very likely surpassed the level of Dao realm. As for the known cultivation realm in this world, it only stopped at the 9th tier of Dao realm. However, this knowledge was still not enough. Even though she had obviously surpassed the limits of this world, how could she confirm and proceed to the next step? What was the specific realm? There was no way forward. Ji Lingxi did not know anything about this, neither did Yun Yang. In fact, no one in the residence of Yun knew. Yun Xiaoyao, Lao Mei, Feng Mafei, none of them knew. Yun Yang had asked the 10 kings of the Yama underworld about this, but it was a pity that the 10 Yama kings were clueless about it as well. Instead, they had promised to ask on their master's behalf when he came out of his closed-door cultivation. Such a high-end question could only be answered clearly by those seniors and experts who were above the pinnacle. Yun Yang did not mind. After all, he had always thought that Ling Xiaozue and the rest would be back in a few days anyway. They should know about the level above Dao realm. If such a thing were to happen, perhaps it was the first time it had happened in this world. She had broken through the highest level that a cultivator could reach in this world, yet she did not know where she should go on the road ahead. That was not right. Although Ji Lingxi did not know the name of the road ahead, nor did she know where it led to, she was still walking on this path resolutely. She should be striding forward at an extremely high speed. Such a cultivation method was not intoxicating, but rather intoxicating. Chapter 723. Yun Yang was not someone who would always be abused. Although he was destined to be unable to do anything to Ji Lingxi in the short term, he could still do it to others. When the beatings were too much for him, he would find a softer way to retaliate. First, it was Dong Qianling and the other 3 young masters, along with all of their guards who ganged up on Yun Yang. However, this formation had only lasted for a day before the 4 of them hung up the no challenge sign and played dead on their beds. I can't take this abuse anymore. Yun Yang's words of "you're all going to do great things with me in the future, how can you be so lazy? Get up," were met with a snort of contempt from the 4 noble young masters, completely ignoring him. We've never had such great ambitions. From the very beginning, we've been most interested in eating and waiting to die in this world. To be able to level up happily and comfortably has already exceeded the limits of our greatest pursuit. Popinjays? What's so bad about popinjays? Looking at the world's popinjays, who else dares to say they're on par with the 4 of us other than you, boss? We're content, we're always happy. Boss, please spare us. We're really not made of that pinnacle material. Yun Yang was speechless and helpless in the face of the 4 young masters' tearful pleas and professional behavior of playing dead. Faced with such unmotivated fellows, Yun Yang was helpless even if he had 1,000 tricks up his sleeves. Are you all bragging when you say you're going to do great things with me? We do want to do great things, but there are prerequisites. The degree of hardship has to be within the limits of what we can handle. The fortress of resilience has already used up all of our ambition, loyalty, and spirit. Our future endeavors have to be built on something that isn't hard at all. It would be best if we could still live comfortably. Yes, it would be best if we could live comfortably and be envied by others while accomplishing a great undertaking that others can only look up to. Faced with such arguments, Yunyang had to suppress his urge to kill several times before he could do so. In fact, the four of them did not dare to say something directly. Even if we need to train to become strong, we can do it step by step. We don't want to become fat in one bite, and we refuse to be abused. Big brother, your strength is so much higher than ours. You want to spar with us, but in fact, you want to vent your frustrations. Do you think we don't know that? Do you really think we are stupid? You seem to be addicted to getting beaten up every day, but we don't have that kind of addiction. Besides, you were hit by a beauty, but we were hit by you. We are not masochists, and we will definitely not be your target for venting. Yunyang did not have a suitable outlet to vent his frustrations when these fellows refused to cooperate. Helpless, he began to train his spiritual beasts instead. Thus, the 5 white East became his punching bags. Where's your monkey? Yunyang's sudden question stunned Jilingxi. Jilingxi's beloved pet, the 1,000 illusion monkey, was a solid 8th level mystical beast, only slightly lower than the Eclipse Panther. However, the 1,000 illusion monkey was a spiritual species of heaven and earth, so its chances of leveling up were higher than the Eclipse Panther's. If the two were in the same level, the former's power would be a notch higher, especially the 1,000 illusion monkey's unique gift of being able to transform into a myriad of forms. Didn't I tell you? Jilingxi said, I sent the monkey out to look for something. Only the monkey can find something like this. Look for something? What is it? Yunyang frowned. Oh, it's the beauty herb. Cough. One of the main ingredients of the exquisite monkey wine? Jilingxi's words were evasive, and her subsequent explanation was obviously an attempt to cover things up. Beauty herb? Yunyang chuckled strangely. Jilingxi's embarrassment turned into anger. What are you laughing at? Are you itching again? Nothing. Yunyang kept his mouth shut tactfully. Yunyang did not know if the beauty herb was the main ingredient of the monkey wine, but he did know that the beauty herb had another effect. It could wash away the disguise that had been applied to one's face. It was obvious that Jilingxi was trying to remove the layer of ointment that he had applied on her. The reason she had used the ointment to disguise herself that day was mainly because of the threat from Lei Dongtian. However, with Jilingxi's current cultivation base and ability, dealing with Lei Dongtian would be like playing a game to her. She could kill him with a wave of her hand, so there was no need for her to worry anymore. There was no longer a need for the disguise ointment to exist. The ointment's effective time is coming to an end. It'll disappear in a few months at most. Why waste time looking for the beauty herb? Yunyang's EQ was too low, so he spoke his mind. Jilingxi was enraged at once and sparred with Yunyang again. Shengguan Lingxiu, who was standing on the side, burst out laughing. She finally felt that Yunyang did not understand his daughter's thoughts at all. His EQ was so low that it was insanely low. It was obvious that Jilingxi wanted to restore her original appearance as soon as possible, but what was the point of restoring her original appearance? As the saying went, a man would die for his bosom friend while a woman would dress up for the man who loved her. Jilingxi wanted to restore her beauty as soon as possible, so of course she wanted to show it to Yunyang. However, not only did this fellow not appreciate her kindness, he had even exposed her daughter's thoughts in front of everyone. It was intolerable, unbearable. If you don't get beaten up, who will? Shengguan Lingxiu was delighted. Today Yunyang seemed to have decided on one thing, to poke at her sore spot. Then what about your little wolf? Jilingxi's expression darkened, her eyes rimmed with tears. He was beaten to death by Lei Dongtian the last time. Yunyang's expression darkened as well. Hearing Lei Dongtian's name again, Yunyang could not help but sigh. King waited for you to send resources, medicinal herbs, medicinal pills and medicine over. Why did this fellow disappear just like that? Did he say he was here for revenge? Ever since he left here the last time, he had disappeared without a trace like a bird killing a rabbit. Could he have died on the way? Yunyang mumbled. Compared to Tiantang City's peace and tranquility, the turbulence in the martial world was still unfolding. Starting from Tiantang City, it extended to all corners of the martial world. It was another tens of thousands of miles of pursuit. When Yunyang had tossed the 2 pieces of treasure map, they had curled up into a ball. Therefore, during this period of time, no matter whose hands they ended up in, they were still intact. No one was foolish enough to separate them after obtaining them. Within this short period of time, the two pieces of treasure map had changed hands dozens of times. Along the way, countless mountains along the way had been smashed to pieces. Countless martial world people had participated in this battle. The sea of people fought from the south to the north, then from the north to the south. It was a frenzied battle. Chapter 724. Watching as more and more people died in the fight for the treasure maps and the scale of the fight grew more and more terrifying, the 10 kings were increasingly shaken. When would this martial world catastrophe that started in Tiantang City end? Towards the end he saw some experts who were not weaker than him jump out one by one, and then die a violent death. He saw some bold and skillful experts risk their lives to snatch the treasure map, but they were immediately blocked by others, surrounded, beaten up, and madly slaughtered. Putting themselves in their shoes, the 10 Yama kings felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. This is a catastrophe that has never been seen before. King Chujiang's eyebrows were twitching, his facial muscles twitching unconsciously. Perhaps, this is a martial world catastrophe that is rarely seen in 100,000 years. Even in the legends, I've never heard of a catastrophe of such a scale. Be it the number of people involved, the range of coverage, or the number of deaths, it's unprecedented. After this war, the entire martial world will be peaceful for many, many years. That's right. The number of top-notch experts in this world will be reduced by at least a third, maybe even more. The 10 kings could all see this, but they could do nothing about the current situation, and there was nothing they could do. Not only could they not stop it, they had to add fuel to the fire. Moreover, it was absolutely impossible even if a deity came out to stop the war now. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. What good does this martial world catastrophe bring to Yunyang if it continues? Why did he deliberately set up this trap? The 2 dragonhide treasure maps are the real deal. First Court King Qingguang asked. Only with effort will there be returns. The benefits that Yunyang can reap are endless. At least to him, the price of the dragonhide treasure maps is worth it. In fact, it's far more than that. Emperor Song sighed with melancholy. Now that the continent's struggle for hegemony has basically come to an end, Yutang's dominance is already a foregone conclusion. As long as we annex the other countries according to the sequence, we can completely unify the continent and pacify Tianxian. If there is any force in this world that can interfere with or even reverse this trend at this critical moment, it can only be the forces of the Jianghu. Whether it is to assassinate a general amidst an army of 10,000, or to gather a large number of powerful men to face them head-on, the people of the martial world are an unstable factor for Yutang to unify the world. Do you know what kind of benefits the other empires other than Yutang can offer in exchange for the intervention of the martial world forces when it comes to a critical juncture? For a country that was about to perish, what price couldn't they pay? On the other hand, no matter how amazing a person is, there will always be a price that can be bought. At the last moment, the higher-ups of the various countries will definitely think of this method to reverse the situation. And before the war to unify the world begins, I'll first stir up a calamity in the world of martial artists that is sufficiently shocking, enticing, and influential. I'll use it to greatly injure the martial artists. It might be a little cruel, but it's a great move. Yunyang's initial plan was to eliminate the biggest threat, the assassin organization that only cared about money and not people. Was even better. More than 100,000 famous assassins were destroyed in a day. It could be said that half of the threat from the martial world forces had been removed. Assassins have always been the greatest taboo in an army of 10,000. Up until today, the martial world's people are still fighting one another. The more they fight, the more their strength is damaged. Then, they will have less and less ability to participate in the war to unify the world. I think that when this calamity ends and the whereabouts of the 2 dragonhide treasure maps are completely unknown, the survivors will not only have to worry about their enemies coming for revenge, but they will also have to spend a lot of energy to settle down their families, heal their wounds, and improve their skills. I'm afraid they won't have the mood to participate in the war to unify the world. Other than that, there's another advantage to Yunyang's plan. After the battle in Tiantang City, the entire martial world will owe Yutang officials a favor. As long as this favor remains, when the martial world's calamity ends, Yutang will be able to arrange the follow-up and come up with any corresponding strategies without worrying about interference from the martial world forces. This is a calamity that has the martial world's forces down to their very bones. Whether it's the start, the reason, the juncture, the time, or even the diversion of the calamity and the diversion of the tiger from the mountain, everything has been arranged perfectly and seamlessly. Emperor Song heaved a long sigh. Young Master Yunyang is indeed a genius of his generation. He has foresight and is meticulous at every step. I'm not nearly as good as he is. First Court King Qingguang could not help feeling dissatisfied and confused by Emperor Song's words. He said, everyone knows that young Master Yun has a good mind, but he can't be as good as you say, can he? Your brain is widely acknowledged as the best among us brothers. If you're not nearly as good as him, wouldn't we not dare to talk to him? Emperor Song glanced at his brother mockingly and said, have you forgotten who Yunyang is? Other than being Supreme Cloud, he's also Supreme Wit, the Supreme Wit of the 9 Supremes. Do you know how he grasped the opportunity in this situation? How much benefit has Yutong gained from this incident? You can't even think about it, yet you're still trying to compare yourself to him. You're right about one thing. All of you should really talk to him less in the future, or else you'll have to bargain for him on your own accord when he buys all of you over. The other kings were puzzled. Well, third, we all know that we're not as good as you. Can you please explain in detail? Is that Supreme Cloud really as sharp as you've said? Emperor Song snorted and rolled his eyes, saying, let's start from the beginning. Actually, from the moment Dong Tianling revealed this, I've already told all of you that this was 99% of Yin Yang's setup and manipulation. It's just that even I didn't see it too far back then. At most, it was because of the importance of the Dragonhide treasure map that I connected it to Yin Yang's plot. What he's plotting is not trivial. It's only now that I've come to this that I can fully understand the whole story. The starting point of Yin Yang's plot was to borrow Dong Tianling's hand, using his Popinjay appearance to toss out the Dragonhide treasure map flawlessly. The 4 Popinjays completed this foreplay with their exquisite performance and stayed out of the matter as victims. This is also the fundamental reason why the 4 young masters who started it all remained unscathed when the entire martial world was torn apart, with ghosts weeping and deities grieving. It's always been said that the best liar can win people's trust with 9 truths and 1 lie. However, Yin Yang's plot can be seen through at a glance, but can you not jump into it? That's the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy map. Don't you think it's amazing just because of this? Can you take it if it were you? Chapter 725. Where have those pinnacle experts gone? Are they really not tempted by the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy? The answer is obviously no. Needless to say, everyone knows the names, Dugu Chou, Ling Xiaozue, Mr. Nian, and the other experts of the 4 Seasons Tower. Of course, there's also Jun Moyan and our old master. Even so, there shouldn't be more than 10 people. Is there any objection to this number? Logically speaking, there's a high chance that all of these people will show up. Then, one of them will seize the opportunity and take the secret map. Those who act later will sigh at their bad luck and lose the treasure, but they won't make a move to fight to the death. In short, as long as a peerless person appears in this fight would have ended a long time ago. However, in reality, none of them have appeared. Here comes the question. Why haven't any of these people appeared? It's obviously a rare treasure that's tempting enough. Actually, the reason is simple. Ling Xiaozue, Dugucho, and the rest left the residence of Yin not long ago. Their target was Mr. Nian. If I'm not mistaken, there's a high chance that those pinnacle experts are restraining each other now. They don't have extra energy or time to come here. They might not even know that the martial world is already in such a state. There's no one who can make the final decision. Everyone can see this, so the opportunity has appeared. To these people now, this is an opportunity that belongs to everyone. Without pinnacle experts, such an opportunity is hard to come by. Too many people are overconfident, thinking that they're the destined owner of the treasure map. Naturally, they swarm forward together, forming the most formidable force. Then, they make use of the personal intentions of this force to limit this battle to Tiantang City. Is this timing accurate? Why didn't Ling Xiaozue and the other pinnacle experts appear? How would the ordinary martial world people think about the specific reason? They only know that this is an opportunity, so they go forward with all their might. That's why the stalemate is here. Everyone shares the same thought. This further facilitates Yun Yang's plan, gathering all the hidden threats of the martial world that could affect Yutong's unification of the world, thus eliminating them in one fell swoop. Doesn't Yun Yang know that those assassins were hired by the crown prince and the princes? Targeted at him? He knew it better than anyone else. However, he kept delaying and didn't fight them head-on. He kept maintaining the unhurried situation, making it difficult for the assassins to take advantage of him. In the end, he was able to deal with them in one fell swoop when the incident broke out. Then, with the military's assassination of the assassins, The plot continued and the crown prince was dragged down from his throne, further worsening Yutong's internal threat. And this time, we're directly solving the national crisis. Not to mention he even schemed to kill his greatest personal enemy Ouyang Shaoxi in this incident. He has laid out layers upon layers of schemes, and every step he takes is alarming. From what I can see, Yunyang has considered every aspect when he set up this game. He has grasped every possible change within his grasp. Even our concourse of the underworld is within his plans. Ah? Why are we within his plans too? What does this mean? Could he have schemed against us? We're allies with him. If he schemed against us, it would be his fault. The hot-tempered king of Chakravarti grumbled. Honestly, Yunyang can't be blamed for this scheme. We're considered an unexpected variable in this battle, but it's also the biggest variable. Because we're strong enough, the chances of us obtaining the Dragonhide treasure map will be difficult to match once we join forces. Of course, the most important thing is that we don't care about the Dragonhide treasure map. Even if we have the chance to obtain it, we'll still hand it over to Yunyang eventually. There's a high chance that Yunyang has considered and arranged this from the beginning. Otherwise, why would he promise us a chance to leap forward when the matter is over? This proves that he has long discovered a place similar to a Yin Qi palace, a place with unusually dense Yin Qi. He has indeed chosen the most suitable time to release us. He has allowed us to do the dirty work and attract all the subsequent attention, but there's only admiration and not the slightest bit of hatred. Furthermore, we can continue to work together in the future, and our relationship might even grow closer. Because we each take what we need, the benefits are great. Emperor Song chuckled. Looking at it now, can you all see it? Now, the martial world is at peace, the imperial court is stable, there's nothing to worry about, the military and government are united. There are no traitors within, no strong enemies outside. The army is strong, the steeds are strong, and the generals are as numerous as the clouds. In addition, even the hidden threat of the fight for the throne has been eliminated. If Yutong still can't unify Tianxian, it'll be the strangest thing in the world. Come to think of it, the price that young Master Yun paid for this setup was ultimately those two maps. Moreover, he had taken a stroll in the martial world and returned them to his hands unscathed in the end. It was truly a great profit without any capital. Such calculation, such strategy, to have all the heroes in the world in the palm of his hand, how terrifying is that? Emperor Song let out a heartfelt sigh of admiration. King Qingguang shook his head and said, "Admire later. How can you be sure that these two maps were taken by young Master Yin? Also, how can you tell that we'll definitely be able to take these two maps back?" Emperor Song looked at his brother like he was looking at an idiot. The other kings also looked at him like they were looking at an idiot. They sighed at the same time. I have nothing to say to someone with your level of IQ. The average IQ of the Yama kings of the 10 halls was pulled down by someone. The one who said this was the king of equality. His face was filled with a sense of superiority. There's no doubt about this. My foolish brother, stop asking questions, it's embarrassing. King Chujiang sighed. What are the kings of the concourse of the underworld best at? It's none other than concealing our tracks. This fight is finally coming to an end. As long as no powerful figure appears, this treasure map will be ours for sure. Everything is just waiting for us to enter the battle. I can say with certainty that those who can make the final decision are now restrained by each other and are destined to miss this battle. There's no doubt about it. Emperor Song said decisively, we'll make our move tomorrow and take the treasure map back. We'll end this scheme once and for all. The others nodded in agreement. They all looked impatient. Yunyang was in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map, but they were also in a hurry to improve their abilities. First Court King Qingguang scratched his head and said, I see. He was also in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map and obtain the opportunity to improve his ability that Yunyang had promised. As he thought about it, he understood what was meant by no doubt. He was already in such a hurry, what else could he do? Although Yunyang had put it nicely, the item was in his hands. If he said he would not give it to him, what could he do? If he could not retrieve the treasure map, why would he need the opportunity Yunyang had given him? This was a simple and obvious matter that would benefit both parties. At this moment, the few fellows who could make the final decision that Emperor Song had mentioned were in a sorry state, but they were indeed destined to miss this battle. Yunyang's calculations were correct. Chapter 726. Now Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho, the two bosses, were truly frustrated. Logically, based on their own judgment, the combination of the four of them was already the strongest team in the world. Be it in terms of wits or strength, they were invincible, let alone someone who dared to cause them trouble. Their team consisted of the current unrivaled expert Ling Xiaozue, the former unrivaled expert Du Guqiu, Heaven's Inquisition who knew yin and yang and could predict the future, and the weakest of them all was the legendary god of wine, an unparalleled expert with a pinnacle cultivation base, Feng Xiang'e. Whether it was in theory or in reality, the team of these four people could be said to be invincible anywhere in this world. In spite of this, the reality was that their journey had not been peaceful at all. After a period of recuperation, the four of them who had recovered from their injuries, walked out of the mountain. Feng Xiang'e expressed his indignation and suggested to find a way to cause trouble for the Four Seasons Tower again, to catch them off guard and catch them off guard. No matter how bad the outcome of the previous battle had been, it was confirmed that the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters was in the mountain. Now that everyone had recovered from their injuries, why not return the favor? The reason they had been tricked the last time was because they had not been aware of the ambush. Now that everyone was on guard, how could they be ambushed again? When he made his move this time, he was planning to catch the enemy off guard. He should have succeeded in one strike and it was flawless. Ling Xiaozue and Du Guqiu thought that Feng Xiang'e's suggestion was reasonable. In particular, Ling Xiaozue had another concern in his heart. Honestly speaking, it was the most appropriate thing for them to go back and look for Yun Yang to discuss their next move. However, based on the various assessments, there had to be a problem among the four of them. If they could not find this person and brought him back hastily, it might lead to a greater disaster. On the other hand, if they were to attack the Four Seasons Tower again, regardless of whether there was a trap or an ambush, they would be more certain of their own people after experiencing it. It was better to clear their surroundings and return only after they had come to a conclusion, in order to avoid any lurking dangers. If he and Du Guqiu, two top-notch experts, had actually done something that they were unaware of, they would become the biggest joke in the martial world. Not only would they be a laughingstock, they would be shameful for all eternity. But at the end of the day, they couldn't afford to lose. There was something wrong with his mentality. The more he couldn't afford to offend these four people, the more he didn't want to be at a disadvantage. What? I'm so awesome, but I'm losing here? Thus, in the end, the three of them agreed to this suggestion. Gu Chaoyang, on the other hand, was the only one who objected to the suggestion firmly. He declared, "This trip is fraught with danger. Not only is there a bloodbath, but there's also the danger of a trapped dragon. Repent and you'll be saved, you'll lose if you advance rashly." It was an unprecedentedly firm objection. However, Du Guqiu was already suspicious of him. Why would he listen to him? At the same time, Ling Xiaozue wanted to confirm something as well. In addition to Feng Xiang'e's incitement, there was no way Gu Chaoyang could overturn the idea of a counterattack no matter how insistent he was. If he said a few more words now, the four of them might start fighting on the spot and he would be the target of all. The other three would definitely attack him together, and the only result would be him being beaten flat. That would be a great injustice. He had no choice but to reluctantly agree. Therefore, on the same night, the four of them crept up the target mountain again to explore the Four Seasons Tower. The mountain where the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters was located was extremely steep. The highest point of the main peak in the middle was so high that it reached the sky. A conservative estimate would be about 10,000 feet tall, surrounded by cliffs. The entire peak was like a brush holder. In fact, the peak's name was Brush Holder Peak. Feng Xiang'e pointed at the Brush Holder Peak from afar and explained rather proudly, "See that? Only when you enter this area can you see this mountain that's like a brush holder. The last time we were ambushed, it was in the wide area under the brush holder. This time we've crept up the Brush Holder Peak, coming out of the blue and taking their headquarters by surprise. Even if they're on guard, will they be able to defend themselves against this?" Feng Xiang'e's plan could be said to be extremely bold, but it had its own unique and unexpected aspects. Ling Xiaozue and Du Guqiu pondered for a moment, feeling that the plan was feasible and had a high success rate. No matter what, with the combined combat power of the four of them, even if there were any accidents, it would be difficult to stop them if they only wanted to flee when things went south. No matter how strong the other party was, it would not be difficult for them to retreat unscathed. "I'm already half a step into my coffin. I don't want to leave an obsession in my heart that will linger in my death." Ling Xiaozue and Du Guqiu nodded in agreement to Feng Xiang'e's words. Gu Chaoyang's opinion, the only one who disagreed, was meaningless. In spite of this, Gu Chaoyang still insisted on one condition. It was fine to go up and fight. However, they had to plan out their strategy and retreat beforehand. Not to mention anything else, Brush Holder Peak was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Although everyone's skills were superb and they would not be bothered by the hindrance, there was still a limit to one's strength. The martial world had countless tricks up its sleeves, and it was impossible to guard against them. Therefore, there had to be a certain level of safety measures. For example, it was not enough to prepare healing medicine. They could hide it in their mouths and swallow it when they needed it. Based on the terrain, they could make a few kites that could glide high up in the sky just in case. Could they guarantee that they would not fall into some kind of trap that prevented them from gathering mystical chi? In addition, their bodies had to be prepared as well. As for the antidote, they might as well consume it beforehand to defend against poison. If there was nothing else, they could just treat it as medicine. It was better to be prepared and avoid the risk. Gu Chaoyang's series of requests annoyed Dugucho to no end, but Gu Chaoyang was insistent on it. My request is the biggest consideration for the implementation of safety. It's for everyone's good. If you have any objections, why don't you do as I say? Alright, then forgive me for not accompanying you. The three of you can go play yourselves. The three of them thought about it and realized that Gu Chaoyang was indeed doing it out of kindness. The capability that the Four Seasons Tower had displayed earlier was indeed astounding, far above their own. It was not excessive to be cautious, so they did as they were told. Then the four of them charged forward. However, what they did not expect was that they were ambushed once again as they charged forward. When the four of them set foot on Brushholder Peak, their powerful deific consciousness quickly realized that there was no one on the peak. When they carefully snuck into the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters, there was still no sign of anyone in the only building on the peak. How could the four of them not know that something was amiss when they saw the situation? They wanted to pull themselves away, but it was too late. A super explosion that they had never seen before erupted. With a loud boom, the entire towering peak that was tens of thousands of feet tall turned into rubble and debris in an instant. The Four Seasons Tower had buried an unknown amount of explosives under Brushholder Peak. They were detonated at the right time, resulting in such an earth-shattering explosion. Today is the last night watch. Tomorrow I'll go to Jinan for a meeting. During this period of time, the incident was only one of the aspects. Actually, I've been thinking about something. The plot in Tianshan continent had basically ended, and we were about to enter the Bound of Universe. The Bound of Universe was the last segment of the book. The setting and plot needed to be considered. However, this was not the main reason. The main reason was that the intention was wrong. Before writing this book, the intention was to create the country and the world. Then, the more he wrote, the more confused he became. He had put in 1,000 times the effort to write, only to realize that there were two extremes. Those that he liked and those that he loved to death. Those that he did not like he would not even look at. Chapter 727. It was fortunate that Gu Chaoyang had vetoed Feng Xiang's suggestion to split up when they were ascending the peak. The four of them were gathered in one spot. The highest point of the peak was near, and the explosion was triggered from below. The moment the explosion detonated, the four of them had already flown up to avoid the direct impact of the explosion. Otherwise, despite their profound cultivation base and strong cultivation base, they would have perished here and gone to the underworld together. However, even if the four of them reacted quickly and avoided the direct impact of the huge explosion, the four of them who had to bear the impact of the aftermath of the violent explosion couldn't help but be seriously injured. The four experts hadn't even exchanged blows with the enemy, but their combat strength had already been depleted, and their condition was greatly ruined. The force of the explosion that could destroy an entire mountain in an instant was enough to annihilate any expert in this world. Even those as strong as Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho were no exception. After a while, the shockwave from the core of the explosion gradually subsided, but the rumbling continued to resound. Many peaks were still shaking and collapsing from the aftershock. The accumulated snow on the mountain peaks that had not melted for tens of thousands of years had fallen from the clouds, turning into a massive avalanche that should never have appeared. The mountains and plains were covered with ditches and rivers. For a time, there was no other sound between heaven and earth, apart from the loud rumbling sounds. After a long time, the land that had been bustling for a long time finally began to calm down. However, the surrounding peaks that had radiated out were still trembling incessantly. Amidst the white snow, there was a sudden explosion. A silhouette in green shot out from within. It was Ling Xiaozue. Ling Xiaozue was indeed the unrivaled expert in the world. He could still maintain his composure even in the face of such a terrible situation, waiting for a chance to escape. It was impressive indeed. However, he was not in a good state right now. At least, his external appearance was not optimistic. He was limping, his green robe stained with blood, and there was a large dark stain on his chest. It was the blood he had spat out from the intense tremor. His face was bruised and his hair was messy. His eyes were filled with rage. As soon as he came out, he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately looked around to make sure his surroundings were safe. Then he took a deep breath and began to circulate his energy. After a while he spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion recovered a bit and then he let out a long sigh. His combat strength, compared to normal, was only 10% to 20%. In other words, this was the most dangerous moment in Ling Xiaozui's life. Ling Xiaozui forced himself to calm down and began to search for traces of the other three. Trapped in such a powerful explosion, would they still have a chance to survive? Just then there was another sound in the snow. It was Dugu Chao's head popping out before he leaped out of the snow. Dugu Chao's condition was similar to Ling Xiaozui's. He was panting heavily and vomiting blood. Suddenly, he shook his head and moaned in agony, closing his eyes and opening them again. Only then did he focus his gaze on Ling Xiaozui. "How are you feeling now? What about the other two?" Ling Xiaozui shook his head and said while panting, "Not yet. They might be buried underneath, but we might have to recuperate first before we can talk about finding them." Ling Xiaozui could already see that Dugu Chao's condition was no better than his own. His cultivation base had dropped to 80 to 90%. If he were to search for them directly, he might die of exhaustion before he could find them. Dugu Chao chuckled and said self-deprecatingly, "It's all thanks to Gu Chaoyang this time." The bloody disaster he spoke of actually came true. This old man was forced by him to wear the ice silkworm robe and put on an additional layer of flood dragon skin to protect my heart. I've also swallowed a few spiritual pills early on. All of them have been extremely effective. Otherwise, even if I had the mystical beast skin kite as support to charge out when the explosion came, I might still have been injured and exhausted. Now that I think about it, if it wasn't for his insistent reminder, I might really have died here this time. Ling Xiaozui chuckled bitterly as well. My situation is similar. It's just that I've lost one of my legs to the boulders. So. The two peerless experts exchanged a bitter smile. A broken leg from a boulder would have been understandable if it had happened to an ordinary person, but it was a joke when it happened to Ling Xiaozui. Ling Xiaozui's leg would probably not even budge even if an expert were to smash it with a sledgehammer. Now, however, it had been broken by the boulder. Since the other party can predict the timing of our attack so precisely, I don't think there's much time left for us. We must recover immediately and try to find the both of them. I think the Four Seasons Tower's men will be here to search for them in less than a quarter of an hour. That's right, that's right. After a short moment, the two of them recovered slightly, and then they started the search and rescue work. Although the two of them were injured and exhausted, the damage to their divine sense wasn't serious. Once their powerful divine sense spread out, it instantly enveloped an area of 50 kilometers, and they quickly discovered two weak auras of life. You take the left, I'll take the right. Get away quickly after we save them. Upon Ling Xiaozui's command, both of them sprang into action without another word. By the time Ling Xiaozui had dug Gu Chaoyang out from the pile of boulders that was 1,000 feet underground, Dugu Chao had just dug Feng Xiang out as well. Both of them still have a breath left in them. Ling Xiaozui grinned. Gu Chaoyang's internal organs are damaged, his internal organs are fried. There are 7 to 8 holes in his head alone. He's dying from his injuries. Dugu Chao coughed and said, Feng Xiang is about the same. His last bit of inner breath is faintly discernible. Both of them are at the gates of the King of Hell, just one last step away. Let's go. It's more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Ling Xiaozui flew up first while Dugu Chao followed closely behind, sprinting at full speed. Although both of them were moving fast, their speed had slowed down a few times compared to before. A few silhouettes were already whistling and flying over from a distance away. Kill Ling Xiaozui and capture Dugu Chao alive. Let's go. The two unrivaled experts could not help feeling aggrieved. They had never been so aggrieved in their entire lives. Now they had been aggrieved twice in 4 days. The second time in particular was like a dragon trapped in a shallow pond, a tiger out of the plains. Looking from afar, one could see the bigger picture from the slightest clue. The newcomers' abilities were not to be underestimated, but they might not have been able to catch their attention. At least they did not have to be chased by others. They had never been so flustered before. As they ran, the two of them could not help but think of a saying, busy like stray dogs, anxious like fish that had escaped the net. They could not help sighing. Chapter 728. Both of them panted as they sprinted, using the mystical chi that they had just recovered to get rid of the smell of the explosion and the stench of blood on them. Both of them knew that although they were slower now, they were a step ahead after all. As long as they avoided them appropriately, they were confident that they could shake off their pursuers. However, the fatal problem now was the aura that their pursuers had sensed. If they did not get rid of these auras, they would die today. After a long while, whether it was a coincidence or not, whether it was by chance or by necessity, both of them arrived at the edge of the cliff and jumped off without hesitation. Was this an accident or not? While jumping, the two of them instinctively felt a strange feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. *CK, who the hell was their father? Was he the unrivaled expert who was sought after by others, or a young man who had just come out of the martial world? He had been chased to jump off a cliff twice in just 4 days. Don't novels always say that cliffs are places of opportunity? Does this also apply to us now? What was different from the previous time was that the Four Seasons Tower's men did not retreat this time. Instead, they launched an unusually strict search, looking like they were going to kill all 4 of them. Below them, Ling Xiaozue and Du Guqiu finally found a hidden spot after much effort. Then Ling Xiaozue dragged his broken leg and began to set up illusory formations. After setting up 3 illusory formations consecutively, both of them brought Feng Xiang'e and Gu Chaoyang along and found a more secluded corner. They dug a hole on the flat ground and lifted up the surface above. The 4 of them went in to hide and moved the surface back to its original position. Not long after the 4 of them had hidden themselves, they heard swishing sounds coming from outside. The pursuers had arrived. There's something wrong with the terrain here. There's a formation. Break the formation. There's no one. So, it's to confuse us. The formation is set up to confuse us. Search again. There's another formation here. Look. There's no one in the formation. It's also to confuse us? This is the 3rd formation? Yes. The unrivaled expert is indeed the unrivaled expert. The 3 illusory formations have taken us an hour. With their speed, they probably won't be able to catch up. Let's go back. Brothers, gather up and listen to the boss's command. This time I can't let those 2 get away no matter what. When I catch up to them, I'll *CK them up. Ling Xiaozue and Ling Xiaozue laid there quietly, their breathing paused, only exhaling once in a while. Ling Xiaozue's hand was still pressed against Gu Chaoyang's back, channeling mystical qi continuously to prolong Gu Chaoyang's life. It was the same for Du Guqiu. Even though they heard that there were no longer any movements outside, the 2 of them still did not move. They remained motionless for an entire day and night before they carefully climbed out with their men. We can't go on like this. We have to find a safe place to save them. They won't be able to hold on much longer. Another day later, Gu Chaoyang, who had been treated, slowly woke up. Just as he opened his eyes, he saw 2 faces above his head, watching him open his eyes with awkward smiles written all over them. Sigh, Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes. Before he could even circulate his energy to recuperate, he began to complain directly. What did I say? Something was wrong, wasn't it? There was a bloodbath, wasn't there? Some of them refused to listen. What happened in the end? Ling Xiaozue and Du Guqiu coughed continuously, trying to cover up their awkwardness, but they could not hide it at all. Where's Feng Xiang'e? Gu Chaoyang shifted his focus immediately. Now that the 4 of them had been ambushed and severely injured, it was a foregone conclusion that their capabilities would be depleted. The urgent matter at hand was to ascertain the uncertain factors. Was Feng Xiang'e the traitor? If he was, he should have taken action by now, right? The further question was, how could the 3 of them escape the conspirators' plot, given their current condition? Feng Xiang'e's condition isn't good. He's worse than you? Du Guqiu's face was dark. You've regained consciousness now at least and can circulate your energy to heal yourself. Only his chest is rising and falling slightly, and there's still some warmth. The rest of him is cold. How could this be? Gu Chaoyang was shocked when he heard that. He lifted his head abruptly, wanting to sit up, but his reckless movement had already affected his wounds. His head felt like it was being hammered by 800 men in a frenzy. He moaned at once, "Io, this is really strong. Let's rest here for now. It's impossible for us to leave now." Ling Xiaozue sighed. "We'll need at least half a month to recover from our injuries. We mustn't act recklessly in this half a month. Death awaits us if we go out." Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes and said, "I've told you that there's a bloodbath ahead, and I've also said that there's the danger of being trapped. You didn't believe me, did you? Do you believe me now?" The old man who had the upper hand began to grumble and complain incessantly. Ling Xiaozue and Duguqiu knew that they were in the wrong, so they ignored him. After some time, Ling Xiaozue forced Gu Chaoyang to take another wave of medicine and slapped the back of his neck, stopping the fellow's incessant chatter and causing him to fall back into slumber. Fortunately, the fellow's cultivation method had recovered its self-defense ability, allowing him to circulate his energy to heal himself. There's still something odd about this. There are many things that don't make sense. Ling Xiaozue told Duguqiu, looking at the two unconscious fellows. Duguqiu scratched his head as well. Yes, it's really odd. Both of them frowned. Although they had been ambushed and were severely injured during the risky attack, they had eliminated the suspicion of Gu Chaoyang and Feng Xiang'e. Gu Chaoyang, who was the most suspicious, had risked falling out to propose a safety measure. It was a prerequisite to save everyone's lives. As for Feng Xiang'e, his injuries were too severe, so severe that it was still uncertain whether he could survive. If he were a spy, would he have to risk his life and play it so realistically? However, why would the Four Seasons Tower see through the enemy's plan and bury so many explosives? Could it be that they had been prepared and were only waiting for the moment the Almighty to strike? This explosion was simply too vicious. Both of them exchanged glances. While there was still a lingering fear in their hearts, they also felt that it was extremely odd and difficult to sort out their thoughts. Dugu, don't you think that our escape this time is still very easy? That we're very lucky? We fought the last time, but this time, we didn't even have a chance to meet, Ling Xiaozue said telepathically. Duguqiu nodded slowly as well. I'm thinking about this as well. According to the situation just now, if the Four Seasons Tower had really seen through the enemy's plan and set it up specifically for us, it's entirely possible that they could have used this explosion to bury us there. However, the men that they've arranged seem to be a little too far away, giving us too much time to react. This is indeed unusual. Ling Xiaozue nodded. According to Mr. Nian's intelligence, since he had predicted our second attack, such a mistake shouldn't have happened. In particular, it shouldn't have happened both times. Therefore there must be a reason for this, a purpose. Duguqiu's expression was dark. But what we're most passive about now is that we don't know what the other party's purpose is. Chapter 729. Ling Xiaozue sighed. This matter was a huge headache for the two experts. After a few attempts, nothing was found. They could only confirm that the other party had other motives. What was it? They were clueless. Everything was the same as before they came into contact with the Four Seasons Tower. Ling Xiaozue sighed and said, when we recover in a few days, one of us will stay behind while the other goes in alone to investigate. The enemy is out in the open while we're in the dark. We have to find a way to improve the situation. Duguqiu did not speak, only nodding slowly. Ling Xiaozue said, the Four Seasons Tower's arrangement is completely illogical, but there's a terrifying motive hidden within this illogic. I'm afraid this is related to something even greater. Duguqiu lifted his head slowly, his eyes gleaming with a sharp sword intent as he uttered word by word, no matter what the motive is, they won't succeed. Compared to Ling Xiaozue and the others who were in dire straits, the Empire of Yutong had nothing to worry about now. The internal and external troubles were all gone, and the situation was unprecedented. The four boarders were well trained and had a high morale. They trained their troops continuously and looked intimidating. Fang Qingtian was no longer weak, but he was in high spirits as if he had been reborn. Staying in the board of military every day, he did not speak or move, but it was enough to pacify the people. Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin were both energetic and physically fit, but they were old and could no longer rely on their muscles and bones. After Yun Yang's cheat, their bodies seemed to be rejuvenated despite their age, as if they were a dozen years younger. Their energy was unprecedentedly exuberant, to the point of eagerness. They had requested to head to the front line a few times to swap the two marshals back so that the two old men could have a second spring and write a new legend in the history of the war. In spite of this, Yutong, from the emperor himself down, be it the military or political parties, were all speechless, unable to respond for a long time. What are you two old things up to? Do you know what you two are talking about? What do you want? If you two are so capable, why don't you just go to heaven? Yutong had Tai Jing in the north, Leng Shan in the south, Fu Baogui in the east, and Wang Yunzhu in the west. Each one of them was a veteran marshal. Including Sun Zihu and the others, they were all capable generals who could take charge. Every one of their subordinates was a warrior who had been through hundreds of battles, an elite troop. However, the more elite the army was, the more it meant that these people had their own personalities, and the harder it was to control them. They only believed in their superiors. Logically speaking, with the western border as an example, Sun Zihu would only listen to Wang Yunzhu. If Leng Daoyin and Wang Yunzhu's orders were to go against each other, there was a 99% chance that Sun Zihu would follow Wang Yunzhu. Come to think of it, there would not be any slip-ups if the two old men really went over. It was the same Western Front, but as long as it was Qiu Jianhan who went over, Wang Yunzhu, who was his disciple, would not say a word. Perhaps he would even cry and shout, "Come, come, come, come." Similarly, if Leng Daoyin were to go to the southern border, there would be no problem. The reason was simpler and more brutal. The current marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was his son. Leng Shan's position as the marshal of the southern border was actually inherited from his father. But the problem was, you two old fogies with white hair and beards who looked like they had one foot in the grave and were half dead just yesterday, actually wanted to play again. What were you playing? Playing cool? To be honest, Leng Daoyin, who was 5 to 6 years younger than Qiu Jianhan, really wanted to go out and take charge of the southern border. Fang Qingqian's health had been poor these few years, so it was difficult for him to have much energy to deal with the military. Once the war broke out, Leng Daoyin had been stationed at the Board of War. He was so bored that he was itching to go. The marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was the best at defense among Yutong's 4 marshals. His defensive skills were unparalleled in the world, but his military strategy was still lacking. Now that Yutong's internal worries were gone, and with the momentum of breaking the four-nation siege, the border defense was showing signs of change. Leng Daoyin going to the southern border could make up for the lack of offensive strength in the southern border. In spite of this, Qiu Jianhan's plan was only to avoid His Majesty's questioning. Now the emperor had to ask old Qiu every day, "What did Supreme Cloud say? Did you manage to contact Supreme Cloud? Who is Supreme Cloud?" Qiu Jianhan was miserable, racking his brains for a solution. Suddenly an idea struck him. "I can't afford to offend you, but I can't avoid you? I'll go to the front line and stay far away from you, alright? I'll go to the western border and see Wang Yunzhu, to see how impressive the western elite troops he boasted about were, to see if they really had the elegance of his father's successor. I want to see if there are any good seedlings there, especially since I have the ultimate art of war waiting to be passed down." No matter how wonderful the idea was, it had to be realized. How could the front line be so easy to go to? His Majesty was adamant in his disagreement. You want to go to the front line? You want to be treated and flattered by your disciples and grand disciples? You want to be far away from the emperor? You don't look that good, but you're dreaming. You must stay in the capital until I find out about Supreme Cloud. Qiu Jianhan could not extricate himself no matter what he did, so he said angrily, "If I can't go then? Leng Daoyin can't go either. Otherwise this old man won't feel fair." His Majesty played right into his hands. He pointed at old Qiu's nose and hollered, "You two old bastards can't go anywhere. You're already so old, if anything happens to you, I won't be able to stop both of your families from crying." Truth be told, the last time Qiu Jianhan was in danger, His Majesty's heart ached. Therefore Leng Daoyin was cooped up at home. When Leng Daoyin found out about this, he was so furious that he almost spat blood. He went around looking for Qiu Jianhan to pick a fight, but the latter avoided him, wholeheartedly looking for a disciple for Wu Ying. On one hand, Leng Daoyin knew that he was in the wrong, so he hid far away. On the other hand, this matter was listed as Yutong's top secret by Qiu, Leng Fang, Tai Shangguan, and the others. It was also a pressing matter. The level of secrecy was even vaguely higher than that of the 9 Supremes. There was no harm without comparison. The 9 Supremes were still irreplaceable to Yutong, but the legend of the 9 Supremes was too lofty, unreachable, and elusive. Wu Ying's disciple, on the other hand, was something that could actually be done. As the few of them studied Wu Ying's works in detail, they were even more certain of Wu Ying's talent. If they could be under his tutelage, they would not have to worry about not being able to learn much. The few of them were smart people. They understood that this was a good opportunity. They wanted to use this opportunity to pick someone from their families to become Wu Ying's official disciple. However, after a few batches of them were sent over, they were all rejected by Wu Ying. They don't meet the requirements. Watching the young talents of their families being eliminated one after another, the few elders felt their stomachs clenched. Our children are all outstanding. If you're not satisfied with this, what else do you want? What are you playing at? After a few days of selection, Wu Ying had only chosen one person from the Qiu family's candidates. This person was only a peripheral descendant of the Qiu family, not a direct descendant of the family. He did not fancy any of the others. Leng Daoyin was infuriated by this. He was so furious that he almost sent a letter to summon his eldest son, the Empire's Southern Marshal Lung Shan, back to participate in the selection. However, in the next round of selection, the son of the Board of Punishments Minister Wu Lai was chosen. Chapter 730. It was common knowledge that Wu Lai's son had no cultivation base. His legs were crippled, and he had even lost his sight for a long period of time. It was only because someone had saved him that he had regained what he had lost and was able to see again. Aside from all these, there was another impression that this child had given others. His mind did not seem to be in a clear state, a little like dementia. What could a person like this do even if he had recovered to his normal state? How could such a person win Wu Ying's favor? Perhaps, what was Wu Ying's standard to gain favor? My standard of choosing a disciple is one's temperament, talent and aptitude are secondary. Wu Lai's son is not old, but he has experienced far more than an ordinary person. His mind has been tempered to an indomitable state. He has no cultivation base and his physique is not suitable for cultivation, but it does not hinder my inheritance. It only needs to strengthen his body. However, this child's level of concentration is not something that most people in this world can achieve. It is the most commendable trait. Wu Ying said, furthermore, it is due to his family's upbringing and the temperament that has been passed down that he will never feel guilty in this life. Those who can keep their hearts as clear as a mirror and have a clear conscience are already the first choice of a civil official. The few elders were speechless when they heard this. At this point, Wu Ying had already chosen his two main disciples, a scholar and a martial one. What was left was probably to urge his two disciples to work harder and take in a few more registered disciples to accompany them in their studies. Wu Lai was pleasantly surprised that his son had been chosen. He was so surprised that he lost his composure, personally thanking Wu Ying, which was rare. It was also the first time in his life that he had ever given someone a gift, a piece of calligraphy that he had written himself, in broad daylight. Qiu Jianhan and the others scoffed at the gift, utterly disdainful. It was true that Wu Lai was an upright official and a capable official, but those 2 strokes of calligraphy were only passable. A gift to thank his master should be more solemn and more precious. You might as well not give this gift at all. Unexpectedly, Wu Ying seemed to have received the greatest compliment from Wu Lai's gift. He was so excited that he hung the calligraphy up carefully and hung it high in the main hall. Could it be that Wu Ying liked this thing? The big shots were overjoyed. In a few days they collected a lot of calligraphy and paintings from famous people and sent them to the teacher, hoping that the teacher would accept 2 more students for the sake of everyone's good intentions and that the calligraphy and paintings were very precious. 2 sheep to let go and a few more sheep to drive. Then a few days later he was told the bad news, Teacher Wu is boiling water with fire. The calligraphy and paintings that were sent over are used to start the fire. It will last for a while. The few big shots were speechless and stunned on the spot. What are you doing? What was he doing? You liked a few words written by a certain someone? We really thought that you liked this thing, so we sent you the famous calligraphy and paintings. They are all truly rare treasures. Saying that each word is worth 1,000 gold is the most modest way of saying it. How could Wu Lai's 2 strokes of calligraphy compare to it? They are completely incomparable. Even if you don't say that it is a precious collection, you can't use it to start a fire. What a lunatic. How could they know that Wu Ying was even more restrained towards materialistic desires because of his stain? Wu Lai was known as the Iron Sky, the most righteous person in the Empire of Yutong. His gift of the Iron Sky in broad daylight meant a lot to Wu Ying. It was a huge acknowledgement. That was why he accepted it and was even more ecstatic because it was a gift from Wu Lai. As for the ones given by others, it was really just a piece of paper with words and drawings on it. How could it be of any more use? A blank piece of paper could still be of some use. What else could a used piece of paper be used for if not used to start a fire? Qiu Jianhan and the others' understanding of Wu Ying was too superficial. They did not know what Wu Ying had been through or what he had done, so how could they understand Wu Ying's true intentions? Just as the few big shots were racking their brains hoping to win Wu Ying over, a shocking piece of news came. Something major had happened in the Empire of Ziyou. The Empire of Ziyou's royal family had rebelled. The prince had rebelled and dragged the Emperor of Ziyou down from his throne. The rebel army and the army that came to rescue the emperor fought endlessly. It was difficult to determine the winner, so the entire Empire of Ziyou was in chaos. The Western Marshal Wang Yunzhu asked, "Should we seize the opportunity to march westward and annihilate the Empire of Ziyou?" Naturally, His Majesty had summoned all the big shots for a discussion upon receiving such a shocking piece of news. This was undoubtedly the best opportunity to expand Yutong's territory. It could even be the prelude to Yutong's war of conquest. However, the bigger the movement, the more cautious they had to be, especially now that they had yet to fully understand why such a large-scale rebellion had suddenly broken out in the Empire of Zio. According to Zio's situation in recent years, even if the Emperor of Zio's performance could not be considered remarkable, it was still average. No matter what, it should be able to be maintained for another 1 or 2 generations. The current rebellion had come without a reason. Since there was no reason, they had to think carefully about whether there was something fishy about it. Was it a trap? A trap targeted at Yutong. Wu Ying and the others observed the sky at night. Because of the implied meaning, they quickly came to a conclusion: Zio's national fortune had truly dissipated. Even if Yutong did not send its troops, the current rebellion would be the last straw that would wipe the Empire of Zio off the map of the continent. Everyone was at a loss regarding this matter. The Empire of Zio, which was known as one of the top 5 empires in the world, had actually lost its national fortune? What was going on? No matter what, everyone realized that this was a God-given opportunity. After the Board of War's discussion, Wu Ying quickly came up with a detailed battle plan. His sword was pointed at Zio and he would annihilate it at full speed. This was a battle to annihilate an empire. Other than the Western troop, which would attack at full force, the Southern troop and the Northern troop would each deploy 100,000 men to support the Western troop from both sides. This was to ensure the advantage of military strength and end the battle quickly. The strategy that Wu Ying had come up with was meticulous and detailed. Every step of the plan, even the daily mission, was clearly planned. A God-given opportunity: annihilate Zio in one battle. The Eastern Line, Fu Baoguo's troops, break out of the Fortress of Resilience and deploy troops at Dongshuan's border. Prevent Dongshan from acting recklessly. If Dongshan makes a move, we must attack them at all costs. The Southern Line, the Cold Mountain Tribe, spread the rumor that Supreme Cloud will come to the southern border to participate in the war, intending to shake De Yuan's foundation. The Northern Line, the Steel Cavalry of Tai Zheng's troop, attack from all sides. Fight on your own, split into 10 teams to harass the enemy in the north, and suppress them within our territory. From today onwards, Tai Zheng will rush to the northern border to guard the north. The nation will begin recruiting soldiers. The time to unify Tianxian is here. Now is the time to build a foundation. Chapter 731. The Empire of Yutong, which had just quieted down for a few days, was suddenly like a spring that had been wound up in a pot of boiling porridge. The entire empire was operating at a high speed, boiling over. A man should serve his country. The heroes are at the front line. Today is the day to build one's career. This is the last chance. Every recruitment point set up across Yutong was filled to the brim with people the moment the recruitment began. This was the aspiration of Yutong's millions of people. To Yutong's people who had had enough of being bullied and had always been passively beaten, the chance to counterattack was like a shot of adrenaline being pumped into everyone. The day of revenge has finally arrived. Under Wu Ying's arrangement, the entire empire of Yutong was filled with a murderous aura. Even the women were filled with righteousness and righteousness. Even the uncles and aunties who were buying groceries on the streets were infused with a sense of valor. The clouds of war were thick, covering the entire territory of Yutong in a very short amount of time. At the same time, Sun Zihu led 50,000 Yutong cavalrymen and charged into the Empire of Zio like a gigantic steel saber. Wang Yunzhu led the Western Frontline's main force of 400,000 men and marched westward. Wherever they went, war banners blotted out the sky. The military was majestic and majestic. The war of annihilation led by Yutong had begun in full swing. Wu Ying oversaw the Board of War, allocating the rations, soldiers' pay, weapons, and all resources needed for this war, sending them to the front line in an orderly yet well-organized manner. Yutong had launched this war with all its might. The war of peace had begun. Watching from such a close distance for the first time, Fang Qingtian, Qiu Jianhan, and Leng Daoyin, the 3 military leaders, realized in shock that Wu Ying had actually completed everything on his own. This fellow probably had no family, no wife, no children, and only needed to be responsible to the Emperor of Yutong. He could even skip sleep when he was busy. In spite of this, everyone was happy to see it happen. After all, even if the 3 of them worked together, they might not be as efficient and accurate as Wu Ying alone. Although the 3 of them had the reputation of being hoodlums, they were broad-minded people deep down. Even though they had been reduced to 3 senior staff officers drinking tea in the military headquarters, they were still full of joy. The truth before them made them feel reassured and gratified by Wu Ying's abilities. Of course they were still a little jealous. Residents of Yun. Shangguan Lingxiu arrived in her martial attire. What is it? Yunyang asked. This time, Yutong has mobilized the army to annihilate the empire of Ziyou. The Shangguan family and Ziyou are mortal enemies. How can we not fight? I have come to bid farewell to young master. Yunyang pursed his lips. Why would you need to participate in such a small battle? Wouldn't that lower your status? Shangguan Lingxiu raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to retort, someone waved his hand and said, "Summon the 6 young fellows from the Shangguan family." Yunyang ordered as the 6 children hurried over. The 6 of you follow the army and announce to the world that the Shangguan family of generals has descended upon the world once more, to put an end to the grudge with Ziyou. Shangguan Lingxiu was shocked to hear that. How can this be? They were still so young. There will be a time for them to go to the battlefield in the future, but not now. If we skip this battle, there might not be many battles that will require them in the future. Yunyang was resolute. Put your heart at ease. They have learned a lot now. Although they are young, it doesn't mean that their combat power is weak. Their combat power is no longer below that of ordinary generals. Other than nurturing the children of the family of generals, actual combat is also necessary, especially this battle. If you miss it, there won't be another chance. He turned to look into Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes. In the past, many children of the family of generals had died on the battlefield. It wasn't because of their lack of military training or cultivation base, it was because of their lack of experience in the battlefield. Instead of saying that they lost to the enemy's schemes, it's better to say that they were not prepared at all. In a battle that is almost certain to win like this, they should be tossed in and nurtured continuously. This is the best way to make them mature quickly. These 6 little fellows are still young, but it's not as if there are no benefits to them. If they join the army, the generals will definitely take care of them, and that's already something we don't need to think about. Coupled with their own abilities and equipment, it'll be hard for them to have any accidents. Yunyang's voice was calm but his words were heavy. The Shangguan family of generals' road to rise again should begin with this battle. Sister Lingxiu, you should actually think about it carefully. If you were to represent the family of generals again at this time, it would mean that the Shangguan family of generals has already fallen and there's no more male heirs. Think about it, don't you agree? From now on you have to try your best not to stand out. Let your children go out and face things and solve them. This is the right thing to do. Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lip and lowered her head. Yunyang's words might not be easy for ordinary people to understand, but to Shangguan Lingxiu she could understand it immediately. Not only did these words make sense, they were also the truth. But they're still so young. What if, at this moment, it's already a what if? Isn't it a 1 in a million situation like this? If we still can't give it our all and we have to wait for an opportunity, even if you were to step out this time and wait until they grow up and reach Shangguan Wudi's level, there's still a what if. However, I dare say that the situation then won't be as good as it is now. Yunyang interrupted her, it's reasonable for you to care for them, but your heart. Sai, even if they grow up for another 100 years, they'll still be small in front of you and in your heart. Shangguan Lingxiu did not speak. After a long time, she bit her lip hard and said, all right. We'll listen to you this time. Compared to Shangguan Lingxiu's verbal agreement but her actual anxiety, the 6 children were eager to go to war this time. Their hearts were filled with excitement that was clearly expressed in their expressions. Yunyang watched coldly from the sidelines as he watched the excitement on the 6 young faces, his heart unmoved. Once they were on the battlefield and used to seeing death, such excitement and agitation would vanish without a trace. The battlefield had always been the best place for a person to mature quickly. He believed that after this battle, these 6 children would be reborn as if they were Buddhas, metamorphosing and improving themselves. However, there was no other way. They were the children of the family of generals. Their future would always be a struggle between life and death. This was their destiny. It could not be changed. And Chapter 732. Shangguan Lingxiu could support them for a while, but she could not support them forever. Similarly, Yunyang could not change their destinies either. The only thing he could do was to bring their destinies forward as much as he could, to make them safer and more stable, to increase their starting point from what was already a very high point. In addition, he had to provide the children with a background that no one would dare to provoke. Up until now, who in the continent dared to provoke Supreme Cloud in this world? That would be seeking death. Do not be impatient. Did they not see that Han Sanhe was killed? Bauer was reluctant to part with his companions, his eyes brimming with tears. There's no need to be envious or sad. When the war to conquer Dongshan comes, no matter how young you are, I'll definitely let you go to the battlefield and fight alongside your companions. Yun Yang's promise brightened Bauer's eyes. Thank you, Uncle Yun. You don't have to thank me. I'm very afraid of your parents now. Other than scolding me, they'll beat me up too. I'm still shaken. Yun Yang answered in a low voice. If Supreme Earth and Supreme Water were still here, they would definitely beat Yun Yang up for making this promise. Whether they thought that it was reasonable or right, Yun Yang, who had made this decision, had to be beaten up. However, Yun Yang would not change his decision. There was no turning back. As an emperor who would pacify the world and lead the world, he had to enter the battlefield and participate in decisive battles. Only by experiencing the brutality of the battlefield and the sharpness of the bloodshed could one understand the value of a soldier's sacrifice, understand the hardships of a soldier and the hardships of the front line. If not for this, how could he protect the country? Dynasties and empires had fallen after a few generations. A large part of the reason was that the emperors had grown up in the palace since young. They did not know or understand anything. What they had seen and heard was nothing more than the teachings of the Grand Tutor and civil officials, the records and books and documents, and the words and atmosphere of the palace maids and eunuchs around them. Living in such a living environment, it was inevitable that one would subconsciously place more importance on the civil side than the military. They would also be intimidated by the murderous aura of the generals. No matter how much the generals tried to conceal their murderous aura, it was still a great deterrent to those who had never been on the battlefield. Sometimes, the so-called high achievements might not really mean that their achievements were too high. It was just that they caused too much of a deterrence to their superiors. Any superiors who felt this kind of pressure from their subordinates again and again would feel extremely uncomfortable and uncontrollable. They would subconsciously reject them. When a country began to value culture over military force, it was a sign that it had begun to go downhill. Correspondingly, the day of destruction would not be too far away. Since the beginning of time, no one had ever been inferior. Shangguan Lingxiu was stopped by Yun Yang, but the 8,000 steel guards of the Shangguan family who originally belonged to Shangguan Lingxiu continued to escort the 6 young masters according to the original plan. This decision made Wang Yunzhu, the Western Army's commander-in-chief, flip the table, smash the teacup, and seethe in anger. Motherf *Ker, do you think this is a nursery? This was a battlefield. It was a battlefield. Do you know that this is AF * King battlefield? What do you want your father to do by sending 6 of these little things over? Are the brains of the Board of Wars people stuffed with *T? He had his aides submit a petition on the spot, requesting for the 6 children to be sent back. In spite of this, Wu Ying, who was in charge of the Board of War, knew at once that it was Yun Yang's decision for the 6 children to participate in the war. How could he reject Lord Supreme Cloud's intention? He ordered Wang Yunzhu directly, 2 choices. First, look after the children and win the war. Second, you come back and let Qiu Jianhan lead the troops in your place. Faced with this choice, Wang Yunzhu wilted immediately. From the bottom of his heart, he had really hoped that his teacher, Qiu Jianhan, could come to the Western front line and watch the war of annihilation that he was presiding over. Not as a substitute. If he were to be sent back because of the 6 children now. His teacher, Qiu Jianhan, had just forgiven him and he was in the limelight of Yutong's first war in this world. He was at the height of his success and was in high spirits. If he were to go back because of the 6 children and have his teacher replace him, Wang Yunzhu could totally imagine what kind of ending he would receive. It would be a light punishment to be expelled from the school immediately. I choose the first one. I'll definitely look after the children and win the war. Wang Yunzhu corrected himself immediately. Actually, I've long wanted to groom a few rising talents. I like these 6 children of the Shangguan family the moment I see them. I'm just afraid that my lack of talent and knowledge will hinder the children's development. The military subordinates were dumbfounded, their eyes filled with disbelief as they watched their marshal write his reply in a fawning manner. Qiu Jianhan, who was in the capital city, slammed the table and cursed when he heard the news. Little brat, this old man wants to *CK all 8 generations of your ancestors. How dare you reject such a God-given opportunity? I know that you're lacking in talent and knowledge, but don't you know to let your father go? Yun Yang had been quiet during this period of time. Other than training the mystical beasts, torturing the 4 noble young masters, and chatting with Shangguan Lingxiu about military affairs, he had sparred with Ji Lingxi. The last point, however, made him feel the fear of being dominated by despair. Not only had Emmy recovered to its original state during this period of time, it had also advanced a lot. The spiritual chi that it could provide now was at a terrifying level in Yun Yang's eyes. Ever since Yun Yang had consumed the treasured resources that Yun Zuyu had given him, his body had been in a steady and continuous state of exuding energy. There was no leakage at all as it turned into mystical chi and assimilated into Yun Yang's body. Furthermore, the endless divine art that Yun Yang cultivated was also a superb cultivation method that was unparalleled in the continent. According to Yun Yang's understanding, this cultivation method could surpass any cultivation method in this world in terms of improvement speed, and it could absorb spiritual chi at least twice as fast. It could be said that the efficiency of Yun Yang's cultivation for a day was at least comparable to a month's worth of ordinary cultivation geniuses. 10 days of focused cultivation was equivalent to a year's worth of hard work for others. Such a speed of improvement was unprecedented throughout the history of Tianxian. It was unparalleled in the world. Ji Lingxi's cultivation method, on the other hand, was at the pinnacle of the continent, perhaps even more efficient than the cultivation methods known in this world, but it was still much slower than the endless divine art. A conservative estimate would say that the difference was at least double that of the endless divine art. In spite of this, Ji Lingxi's improvement in ability still managed to overpower Yun Yang. What was even more outrageous was that the gap was growing wider by the day. It was only a difference of 3 minor levels today, but it might be a difference of 4 levels tomorrow. Yun Yang cultivated with all his might, refusing to believe it. He requested for Emmy to transfer energy to him endlessly, causing Emmy to groan and complain. It was not easy for him to advance to the 7th heaven of Tao realm during this period of time. Even if such a speed of improvement was not unparalleled, it was still something to be proud of. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.